Stacy.
And Doc, today's the day we'll do the thing with is it standard deviation, I think, or they?
Yes, I said that I would do a little bit on it, although it's there in your textbook. Can you look it up for me in the meantime?
Miss, you can go first.
Go first? Okay.
Yes.
Let me go
Thank
first.
you.
All right, so I'm gonna go first. In the meantime, can somebody find it in Popham's text, please? Standard deviation with descriptive statistics with a standard deviation with a little explanation of how to interpret standard deviation. So is everyone seen this little PowerPoint I have here?
Yes, Doc.
All right, hold on a sec. Just hold a sec. I'm always trying to get you to the side, but I can't always seem to do that part of it very well.
And Doc, you took it from Popham? I think the other textbook also offers
Yes, both of them do, but Popham is both textbooks will probably have it, but Popham is that I'm more familiar with.
The other one does. I forget what the name of it is.
So what you do, just look them up in
educational testing,
so that we can refer the class to the particular area, because some people just like to read from the text and they get a better understanding. Okay. All right, but I will go through it in brief here as well, and that's the whole idea, that I'm going to also brief you on it. My problem is just always trying to get this thing to set up how I want it to set up. You know what I mean?
Sure, Doc.
You know me already. Always having
no, Doc. No, we're not going. You know,
always have a problem with this silly thing. Anyway, I'm hoping I can see my thing. Let me reduce it a little because I can't even see the screen good. Okay, so are you able to see my screen properly? Because
seeing a PowerPoint.
Yes, Doc, we're seeing.
Yeah, we're seeing it.
Where was I now? I think I'm going to go on the full screen. It's easier for me. Let me go back. I was trying to modify it down so that I can see you a little better, but it don't work. All right, so we're talking about, let me go back to the beginning to where I was before. Descriptive statistics, ranking. Just give me a minute here. Okay, I want to come from here, analyzing. I just want to walk through a couple of my slides, right? And I have a million slides. So I was just looking for the correct place to start you, because I'm not going to go through everything in my PowerPoint. So we're talking about a little bit of a focus on what we refer to as descriptive statistics, right? Descriptive test statistics, because this is done in relation to test scores, okay? Especially where there is, where they're ordered in rank and where you sometimes are comparing the norm, right, to other scores in the classroom. So when you calculate what we call the descriptive statistics, test statistics, what it will enable you to do is to evaluate certain things about your students. It is part of the whole assessment process, of course, and by carrying out certain calculations, you can have a better understanding of how your students are performing. So you might be able to look at, say, the average score of the class, right? Or you might be able to rank those scores and look across scores to see who is really scoring higher than who else in the class, right? Or you might be looking at who has similar scores in the class. But what we in categories or with labels, we call these kinds of measures of central tendency or measures of variability, right? And they can be represented in different ways. You can represent them in a graph form, or you can represent them by way of tables. Okay, so if you were, say, going to order the scores, your students' scores at the end of a test, right? Then you would order them according to the score outcome from, say, the lowest score to the highest, or from the highest to the lowest, right? So if the student scored 50, 55, 60, 65, then you would order them in that order, right? From low to high. And then you would be able to see how they rank. Now, sometimes in the case where scores might be the same, if you look at that little table there that says grade 7A scores, if these were, say, the outcomes of your student scores, right? You might decide to order 2 that got 26, but you have to give them a ranking. So you put the 1 and the 2 beside the 26, those were the highest, right? So we're ordering now from highest to lowest. And the ranking for those 2 students would be, say, the average of those 2 orders, the ranking, right? So instead of first place and second place in the class, those 2 students would be sharing the rank of 1.5 placement in the class. Now, I believe that we tend to do it in some schools in Jamaica. We do it a little differently in some schools. Is there anyone here who can share how it's done in their school? How do you rank your scores if, say, students have the same score? Can anybody share very quickly?
So for the schools I know, they rank.
Can't hear you good. Can't hear you good, Javon. Talk up a little loud.
You hear me better now?
Come again, just a little more, because
Yes.
this is very important.
Are you
Oh, we
hearing
hear
me
you good
better?
now. Yeah, we hear you
Yes.
good now.
That's
Please
saying what
share.
they do, for I know, is that
Mhm.
they share the rank. They don't
Mhm.
divide or work out anything. So both students have the same highest score.
Right,
Both are
right.
top students. So both have the rank 1.
Okay, good.
The second highest ranked student in terms of grade would be ranked at number 3, because there will be 2 persons higher who would have gotten higher grades than them. So even though they would have gotten the second highest score, they would be at rank number 3.
Oh, okay. So instead of
And that is how CXC does it, if I'm not wrong.
right, right. So no, I know that it's done like this in many classrooms here in Jamaica, but I'm showing you another way. And this is one way you might see in the book, right? In the textbook. But I, time and time again, in sharing with students here in the Caribbean, I get the same kind of feedback like what you're giving now, right? So what he's saying, what Javon is saying is that for those who are not in a classroom, who are not teachers and might not understand the process, all we're doing here is showing you how you might go about ranking the students in your classroom, right? If you eventually go into a classroom, that there's more than one way to decide on their ranking. But first and foremost, you have to order the scores, right? You have to order them from, say, highest to lowest or from lowest to highest. But in order to rank, you would have to definitely start at the highest, right? If you're going to find, say, the first placement, the person who come first in the class, who got the highest score, then naturally you're going to have to start with the highest, okay? But there's 2 ways right, that we know of definitively, and one is what was explained to you by Javon, and the other is what you're seeing here in front of me now. Does anybody have any question to get further clarification on that? Everybody understand the two ways that we just explained. They're sharing the rank, the highest score, the highest scores in the class will share the rank of first position, or you will average the rank between first and second position. And so it would become 1.5 position of placement. So it can be done more than one way. All right. And then the second score below the highest would no longer, you would no longer have a first and a second place. So Javon, suppose you had 3 in first position. How would you rank the 4th person in line?
There will be number 4.
There would be number 4. Okay, everybody got that?
Doc.
Understand that?
Yes, Doc.
Good.
Repeat
Moving
your
on.
question to Javon, please. What was your question?
My question was, Javon illustrated, he used this same table to illustrate that the people who got 26 and 26 in the class would share first position, which would be number 1 rank, right? But
Right.
then you get to the 3rd student, that student would become number 3 rank. So you would skip the 2nd rank. So I
Right.
asked him a very relevant question. I said, suppose you had a 4th person, a 3rd person who shared the rank of 26. What would you do with the 4th person? So you tell me what he said. Explain back.
No, I heard what he said. He said that person would be ranked at 4.
Right.
So I was just trying to reason out, put reason to what is being explained.
Mhm. And does it make sense?
It's different from what you're presenting physically on the slide.
I know,
Because-
and I'm trying to show you
right.
that there's more than one way to rank. That's
Right.
to share.
That's what I'm getting.
Hmm.
So it's how you choose to rank the
It's not how you
student.
choose, it's usually the decision of the institution
Okay.
or
Thank
overarching body, like the ministry, and how they decide, how they, pose the ranking.
Right.
All right, but
Okay.
there's more than one way worldwide. That's what I mean.
Doc,
Uh-huh.
when I think about Javon's example, I was thinking about in the Olympics, when Jamaica got first, second, and second,
Mhm.
when they were giving out the medals, they only gave out three medals, for one for first and the other 2 for second. There was
Right.
nobody in there for 3rd place. So the other person that came below them, even though they got 2 silver medals, would place 4th. So that's similar to what Javon said.
Right, right. Which to me is a little strange, but that's how it's done. I don't really see a good rationale for it myself, quite frankly. I can see you sharing the same rank, but when you jump the next score down to below the sequential rank below that, right? Then that's where I have a problem with it, but that's how it works.
Doc, I share the opposite view to you because I am thinking that in the way how you have explained it, no one comes first because you have 1.5, and then with that you can have a 1.5 person in terms of ordinal numbers.
No, but it's not the person, It's not a
But-
person. It's
But
not a
if you are
ranking.
looking at it in terms of ordinal numbers,
Mhm.
there's no 1.5 position or 2.5 position. So that's why, though I accept and understand the principle behind it, I am not seeing the rationale as you don't see in the other way of having a half position.
Well, you see, what they are doing is they're averaging. Okay, so if 4 people, they're averaging it so that you can see clearly. For me, it's clearer when you average the position. So that's what they're doing, averaging the position. So the two first highest ones, right? The highest score that is shared. That's all I want to say, right? I don't want to say the 2 highest scores because that's confusing. Meaning that the highest score that's shared, what they are saying is they share the rank, right? So they're sharing first and second position, which gives them equally 1.5 position in between the 1 and 2. Whereas the next score down, which is shared up between 3 people, is sharing 3 positions, 3, 4, and 5. So what they do now, they average those 3 positions and say, well, okay, so the 3 of you, 3, 4, and 5 will have to share position 4, which is in the middle of 3 and 5. So I understand it better this way for me, but I know it's not done like this everywhere. So we're just laying it out there, and we just have to go with whatever our overarching body decides. Everybody with me there?
Yes, Doc.
It's not a teacher's personal choice, if you understand what I'm saying. It depends on the overarching decisions
Of the institution. Right.
of the policymakers, right? Okay. All right. So that is just to show your ranking, but that's not where my focus is on today. I'm just going through some things, some basic things in descriptive statistics. So we talk about now measures of central tendency. Measures of central tendency for, is there anyone in the class who has never been exposed to descriptive statistics? And they're really not familiar with any of these measures? Anyone at all who is completely green? You don't have to feel any way.
Doc, I've not been exposed to it.
Okay, all right. So you can always, as I said, it's right there in your textbook. It's fairly easy to read about. And it is sometimes necessary in working out the positioning and ranking and the statistics, or should I say the assessment, right? Statistics for your students' performances, right? So it is a requirement that you have a basic understanding. Now, in a typical average classroom, you're not going to use a lot of this. You'll probably just use like the mean, the average grade of the students, or the total performance of the students. And you'll probably use some of the ranking part of it. But the rest of them, even standard deviation, you're not necessarily going to be using it in a real-time classroom, in an average classroom situation, but you will have to sort of have a basic understanding when it comes to the larger overarching bodies that do the assessments and evaluation in the standardized tests, the outcome of the standardized tests. So that is where you need to sort of have a notion of how to interpret what is going on out there when you see the results, right? So we talk about central tendency and we talk about variability. Those are the 2 main concepts that fall under what the overarching larger label of descriptive test statistics. And under central tendency, it's broken down into 3 sub-concepts: mode, median, and mean, right? And under variability, we talk about range and we talk about standard deviation. So mode deals with the average or the typical score that's occurring within a group, whereas variability, just in a definable way, is where the extent to which the students vary, right, across their entire score platform. So whatever the total scores are right across, what it does is it gives you a notion of the variability among those scores, how they are spread out, so to speak. All right, so ModeNow itself is probably the least reliable of the three types of central tendency, mode, median, right? So what is mode exactly? Mode is, does anybody know what mode is? Because I know most of you are familiar, or many of you.
It's the most frequently occurring.
Right, it's the most frequently occurring score, outcome, or number in a set of scores. So if you were wanting to find the mode of your students in a set of test papers, test outcomes, right? You would line up the test papers. You would record all the scores in order, again, in order from lowest to highest. And then you would look to see what is the most frequently occurring score outcome within that set of students, right? So for instance, a simple example, look at the bottom one. Let us say your scores of the students was 20, 40, 60, 60, 80. What would be the mode score?
It would be 60.
60.
The lower line, yes.
It would be 60, right? And what could it just tell you at a glance, or, you know, just right off the bat? What would it give you a notion of or an idea of in terms of your students?
It might indicate that they're at a 60 grade level, since it occurs most frequently.
All right. I heard another response. Was it Javon again? Why you sound like that, Javon? You can't. You were okay before.
I guess because I'm traveling. It will give you what score or what average level, for the lack of a better term, the students are at. So at what level most students are at in terms of their score. The score would have been referred to like or linked back to a letter grade that most of your students are at B grade, B range, or C range, or A range.
It might define the class essentially as that 60 score class.
Yeah, it can be very deceptive, but at a glance, right? It would just give you an idea of, you know, where the score fall among more of the students, and we don't want to say most, right? Because I mean, it can be 3 out of a class of 20, and those 3 get the same. So it doesn't give you a good, reliable estimate, but at the same time, you have an idea, right? That this is where more of the students are inclined to fall, okay? All right, so it does give you a little bit there. Median, no, what is median? Somebody tell me, quick. What is median? Central tendency.
It's a score that falls when ordered in from largest to smallest, or smallest to larger, that falls in the center or the middle.
Right, the score that really divides the class.
Yeah.
It
two
falls,
quarters.
right, exactly in the middle. So it's definitely, you know, halfway, right? It shows you the sort of midpoint.
Yes.
Then you have to order the scores, right? So you got to order your student test outcomes, and then you would be able to see exactly where your middle score is falling, right? Now, what would happen though if you have an uneven number of scores? You should, I mean, an even number of scores.
Even number.
Easy to find the middle if it's uneven, right? But if it's even, then what happens? Someone who knows.
You add the two on average.
Yeah, you're going to have to add the two middle scores.
Right.
Right. And then average them, okay?
Yeah.
So in that example, for instance, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, 6, you notice that even though we have a mode of 5, right? And we have more than one score of 4, it doesn't matter. When you line it up, you're going to take the 2 middle ones and you're going to add them and divide by 2. So you get the average, and that average would be 4.5 in this case. So what would it indicate for you though? What use would this be? Just at a glance. What you think it could tell you about your students' performances?
The average for the group?
At a glance, right? But not in a reliable way. Again, it might give you a notion, and only a notion of the average, right? The average performance of the classroom, okay? So for instance, in the bottom example there, 20, 40, 60, 60, 80, what would be the median score? Anyone?
It will be 60, Miss, and it will give an idea of where most of the students are.
Yeah, it just gives you an idea again of where most of the students are performing. But again, it is not reliable. It is not necessarily reliable, okay? Especially if you have repeated scores, all right? So that is more than median. So let us look at the next one. The next one now is the popular one, the common one that we all use, and this is called mean. And who can tell us what mean is and how it's calculated?
Doc is an average of all of the scores and divided by the number of takers of the test.
Definitely. So this one does this one have to be ordered in order for you to find it? To determine No, you don't have to order it, right? You have to put it in any ranking order, any kind of order from low to high or anything like that. You just have to add up all of your student scores together and divide by the number of students who took the test, all right? So you can't divide it by the number of students in the class. It has to be the number of test takers to get a true mean, right? The mean score. Now, so if you were to say compare now the mean score, which is the average score of the test, and the median score of the same test, do you see the difference here in this example B? You notice it, example A and example B. Let us look at B, for instance, right? The same set of scores, but in the first example, I have worked out the mean, right? By adding all of those scores, 10, 18, 20, 25, 30, 45, 54, and 60, it came to 262, and I divided by 8 test takers, and so the mean score is 32.75. But in
You know, hold the book to hand, yeah.
the median,
Or close the book and hold it with one hand, okay?
Jason, you okay there?
Right, Doc.
The median, which we learned before, right? Which gives you a notion of, which said that it gives you an idea, right? Of the average score of the class. It gives you an idea. But can you see the big difference between estimating using the median and estimating using the mean? You see the difference?
Yes, it's
Right.
yes, it's a
So-
big difference, Doc.
So definitely you see that the median is definitely not a reliable way of estimating, right? But then again, people have issues with the mean as well. And I'm going to show you why. I'm going to show you why. Okay, so what you notice though is that using the mean to calculate, it is still a little bit more reliable and a bit more accurate than the median, isn't it? Right? You notice the mean is 32.75, and for the same class, the median is 27.5. So the mean is a bit more accurate in giving you the average score of the class than using the median. So when you use median, you think to yourself, and you have to be aware that this is not a reliable form. It's just to give me a notion.
I have a question regarding the mode. If it is the modal number is very high, meaning you have 30 students and 20 of them have the same score, that means it's highly likely that you would assume that they cheated.
Well, you can assume a lot of different things. You can assume a lot of different things. Not only that they might have cheated, but it could be that somebody else give an explanation.
It could be also that they literally just didn't understand a concept. Maybe those questions that they got incorrect, they genuinely, it wasn't taught properly, or they didn't grasp it properly. So they just didn't answer that question, or most of them got that question wrong.
Well, she's not talking about a question now, she's talking about a whole test.
Yeah, like I'm saying,
the test scores to determine cheating, because they could have all gotten 20 out of 30, but would have gotten different questions wrong.
Okay.
So you can't just use the overall test score to determine cheating, as each of them probably one get number 1 wrong, one get number 2 wrong. So you can't just make that general assumption from that.
Right. But
to Jalene's point, she has a point, because it would prompt the teacher now to go individually go through and see which ones they got right and which ones they got wrong. And if they all got the same questions wrong, it might mean that the teacher maybe did not cover that topic or didn't cover it well. But if they all got the same ones right, there could be some cheating going on.
Yes, and what else could it tell you? If a lot of them are getting the same score, are hitting about the same score.
They have a very bright class.
Suppose the score that all of them get is not so high.
Oh dear.
I didn't say 20 out of 30 is not that high.
Maybe they understood the concept in the same way, possibly.
So that, what would that tell you about their performance level or their competence?
Similar performance level and competence.
Yes, it could indicate that you have a very high rate of similar competence in the classroom, right? But what else could it tell you about the test too? Nobody don't hit it yet, and we're going to.
It speaks to the discrimination on the difficulty level of the test. Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. What it is saying is that the test itself needs some revision. It is flagging you as a teacher, right? Because I'm going to show you why. Remember, we spoke about the normality curve, right? In a
normal curve. The normal curve, you mean?
Right. Would that represent a normal curve?
No, that's skewed.
That's skewed. Which way is it skewed?
Depending on how much of them. If it's a high scoring test, it would probably be to the right.
And if it's a low scoring,
to the very low scoring
tell
test,
you that the test paper itself
is to the left.
Ah, excellent. And that's part of where we're going, right? So this right away is going to flag you as a teacher to look back at your test, because not following the average curve, then it means that there could be something off with the test itself. The test could be either too hard if it's going in one direction, or too easy if it's going in another direction. It should discriminate, as Javon was saying, in a certain way so that it more or less follows the normality curve. Because that's how performance, what should I say? Performance flow, right? That's how the flow, based on research, it's supposed to follow a basic normality curve, right? Where so much percentage of the students should get between a certain range and the others perform at the higher end or the lower end. Understand? So if it's not more or less following that trend or flow in grades, then you need to go back and it's not discriminating well enough. All right, so that's part of what we spoke about before, but here it has come up again and it's going to come up in this. So although we looked at mode and we looked at median, and we said that of the two, mean would give you the better and more reliable outcome of your test scores. But at the same time, there are shortcomings with the mean, right? There are shortcomings with the mean. So what does this say to you, this little table right here? If you add it up, let us pretend this is 2 classrooms, right? And one is called 7A and one is called 7B, and they're taking similar tests in similar subject areas, right? At the same grade level. In 7A classroom, this is what the score outcomes look like on the left. And in 7B classroom, this is what the score outcomes look like for the same test, right? And the same grade level, the same subject area. So if you added up all of the scores for 7B, anybody can tell me what is the total? What total you get for 7B? Anyone?
The same 175.
You get the same 175, right? You get the same 175. So classroom 7A and classroom 7B are producing exactly the same test outcome, the same total, right? But what do you notice about their grades?
7A scores are rather closer together. 7A scores are closer together.
Scores is very close together, and 7B scores
are you know, further apart.
Are more varied, right? Am I correct? 7B scores are more varied.
Yes.
Still, the total of the test scores is the same, and it's the same amount of students. So what is that telling you about the mean now? So if the total scores are the same, so that means that this question mark here would be 175, yes? Right? So it's the same 175 and it's the same amount of students. So if you divide that by the 7 students for class 7B, what do you get? The same mean, which is 25, yes? So the 2 classes have the same average score, okay? And yet still, when you look at the scores and how they are dispersed, how they are spread out, you will notice that 7A is performing in a completely different way from 7B, all right? So based on just on face value, what would it say to you about 7A and 7B?
Miss, would you say that the students in 7A on average are performing, more of them are performing better than the students in 7B? Because even though we have very high performers in 7B, we also have very low performers. whereas
Right,
7A has more averagely high
Right.
performing
Right.
students.
So, and it could be that 7A could be equally low right across the board, right? So if you look at it, whether they're equally high or equally low, the focus is on the variability or how the scores are dispersed, right? The distribution, right? And that's what we regard as variability. So in the case of 7A, we could easily determine that the students their competency levels are somewhat similar. Whereas in 7B, we would say that their competency levels are more varied, from very low to very high. You notice that the highest score in 7B, right, is 35. And yet still the highest score in 7A is 26. Which one of these classes would you prefer to have?
Give me 7A.
Why?
Because it's on average, more of them are performing better. So
Yeah.
it would seem that for 7B that either some students are more receptive to the type of teaching that the teacher is giving and some are not, or it's just the students are just not learning. Whereas
Okay, so-
7A, you would say that on average, the students are learning at the same pace. They're grasping, most of the students are grasping at the same pace.
Right, right. So what are the implications of that for, say, the teacher? Let us say the implications for 7B. What are the implications for the teacher and the teacher's approach to teaching? She has a class, he or she is landed with a class that is highly varied. The variability, right, is very high among the students. What would the teacher do? What is that?
Mr. Teacher would have more work to do
Yes.
for that type of class. Because a lot more work to do than with 7A.
Yes,
and
right.
the teacher would have to try to meet all of the learning styles.
You got it. Say it again. So it is possible that the learning styles in 7B, right, are more varied. And so the implications for teaching on a class like that could be that the teacher would have to implement more what they call differentiated learning approaches, right, in that classroom to accommodate the different learning styles, right? Maybe more than 7A, where maybe their learning style is more consistent. All right. So it's just one implication. All right. So just showing you how you can use how you can interpret and based on your assessments, look at all the things we have been talking about just from looking at these basic things. All right. So moving on now. So we spoke about variability, and I think you understand the concept now. So variability, measures of variability focus on quantifying the extent to which the students' score differ from one another. And the two main ways of determining that are what we call range and standard deviation. Now, range tells you, who can tell me what range tells you? Quickly. What is how you
The
calculate
difference between
range?
the highest and the lowest score.
Yeah, range is very straightforward.
Yeah, a simple measure of how varied the test results are.
Right, so it just tells you the difference between the very highest score, right, and the lowest score. So what you notice about class 7A and 7B, class 7A, their range would be 26 score minus 24, which is the lowest score. So the range in the classroom for those test outcomes is 2. Whereas what would be the range for class 7B scores?
35 minus 16.
Yeah, 35 minus 16, right? And how much is that?
19.
19.
Yeah, 19. Now look at that range, right? That's a huge range, right? And yet still,
Count, yeah.
they had the same mean, didn't they?
Yes, I did.
So right away, are you seeing some difficulties with some deficiencies in the concept of mean?
Yes, Doc, and how certain data types
Where
can affect the
mean
mean. Yes.
might not tell you all. It's not
Yes,
necessarily telling you all. It gives you an idea of the average grade in your class, but it's not really telling you a lot about the test takers themselves.
Not comprehensive enough.
Right, it's not giving you enough information about your students, right? And how they are performing. So it give you this, it did give you this facade, right? So two teachers, one class teaching class 7A and one teaching class 7B. And the two teachers are going to boast now and say, boy, the mean of my class was so good, you know? And the other teacher said, but mine was the same. What are you talking about? Right? So we're on the same level. But is that what it really signifies?
No, miss.
Oh, not
No.
necessarily. And you
Right,
see it
right.
here for yourself, right? So what you notice though, what you notice is that the range said something very significant about the type of test takers that was in 7A. The range told us that right away, it flagged us and it indicated that class 7A had more homogeneous type of students. In other words, like ability or like competence levels, right? Whereas in class 7B, the range was able to flag us quickly. It was so high, 19, that it told us right away that, listen, you know, 19 is a huge range. Therefore, it's possible that the test takers are not performing at the same level because there's this huge gap, okay? But you can go even deeper than, and that's what we really want to come to know. So they have this further, right, and deeper measurement that you can use to go further in your assessment to decide how true, what the real performance levels look like. And they call it standard deviation. So what does standard deviation do? It's really like, it's the measure of variability of raw scores, the distance or dispersion of raw scores around the mean, both in the positive direction and negative direction. And the truth is that it's like an average, right, of distances from the mean, so to speak. And they calculate it so that they get like an average amount of distance from the mean, right, with which your students are performing. But you don't have to, this is not something that you have to calculate usually on your own. You're usually either given the mean, you can calculate it if you want to be very, you know, investigative and analytical and analyze your students and how, what the scores really mean, right? But this is something that in standardized tests is normally worked out already. What is the average deviation? And it's given to you, so you have an idea. Okay, so if the standard deviation is low, then that curve that we spoke about would look something like on the left, right? Operating around the mean. Remember, standard deviation is a measure of variability from the mean, right? Around the mean. Whereas if the standard deviation is, then the curve will be more spread out, as you see on the right. But what does it say in terms of actual interpretation? Very similar to the to the range, except that it's a little bit more specific, right? I think I went backward in front instead of forward. Okay, so in a test, the standard deviation or sigma, as represented here, represents the group's average deviation, the total average deviation of the group. So as in case 7A, right, and we are not going to go into detail as to how to calculate it, but it's set out here. What they do is they take the individual deviations for each score away from the mean. So you have like score X minus the mean, square that, right? And then you divide it by the total number of test takers. But as I said, this is not something that you're usually expected to calculate, but rather that you need to have a notion of a fair understanding of its significance in terms of interpreting the true performances of students, right? So in 7A class, when you calculate the actual standard deviation, which we said had a range of only 2, the standard deviation work out to 0.76. When you go through and you do all of these calculations that you see me go through here, right? And get the divide by the n. Whereas for class 7B, the standard deviation worked out to, which you would expect, because remember the range flagged you already. The range was 19 or something. So the standard deviation in this case was 6.09. But what is the significance of that again? So we said that when the standard deviation is low, the curve will look very sort of high and narrow, and it will be wider and lower, more spread out when the standard deviation is high. And so say in a case like these 2 classrooms, which one you think, which classroom would be represented by the left curve and which classroom would be represented by the right curve?
7A would be on the left.
7A left.
Yes, 7A
Right,
would be the one on the left, which would be that scores are closer to the mean.
To the mean.
Are all
To the mean
clustered
square.
nearer to the mean, yes? Whereas when the standard deviation is higher, they're more spread out from the mean. Everybody understand that?
Yes, Doc.
Okay. Following me so far. So where to interpret the two standard deviation of the 2 groups, the standard deviation gives a better picture of each group true performance and mix of abilities. When the standard deviation is small, the scores are bunched together near the mean. It suggests that the test takers are of like ability, a more homogeneous type of group like in 7A. And when the standard deviation, the greater it is, the more the scores are spread out, which indicates or implicates that there is more of a variation of competence levels in the class. So we refer to that as a more heterogeneous type of group, as you saw in 7B. Okay, we know that when the students score, or when that test is properly done and students are well taught, the scores should form something that looks like what we call the normal curve. So this is the path of a normal curve. And in a normal curve, representing the spread of scores in a normal classroom, and I want to say normal meaning normal children, but a normal trend of scores in classroom outcome. About 68.2% of the scores, right, are centered around the middle. 34.1 are usually 1 standard deviation from the mean, which is in the center, that little mu you see in the middle there. And similarly, the standard deviation to the left, which would be in the negative, is represented by about 34.1 under that curve, right? So about 68% of average performing scores, what we regard as the average performing scores in the class, is centered in the middle around the mean. And then moving out from that to the right, right? You'd have about 13.6 to the right and about 13.6 to the left, right? And again, you have about just a small amount that are in the highest performing range, right? Now, if you notice on the curve, this normal curve, which represents the average performing class, right? You have represented 1 standard deviation from the mean, right? 2 standard deviation from the mean and 3 standard deviation from the mean of the positive performing scorers and the negative performing, meaning below the average amount. So you have 3 standard deviations represented, right, in the higher performers, and you have 3 standard deviation represented below the mean. And this is the normal path of students' performances when the discrimination difficulty levels are operating as they should be. Understand, guys? And this is from years of research and going through the statistics over and over. So this is something that we just take as a given. Understand? So based on this curve and how it is set out for us, right, as a given in a normal distribution of scores, represented by 3 standard deviations to the right and 3 standard deviations to the left, we can work out in any classroom with the outcomes of scores. We can actually work what is the standard deviation for each of those class outcomes, the test outcomes, right? We can work out the standard deviation, and we can then see where our test takers are performing on the curve based on that, because we'll be able to see if based on the average score, which is in the middle here, the mean, right? When we work out the standard deviation, we can see if the student is falling above the mean, right? Or below the mean. And if they're falling within a certain range of, say, either average performance or above performance or high performance, and vice versa, right? Just based on how the normal curve is set out. Everybody with me there? I don't know if I explained it so well. Do you have an idea? We're going to just look at something quickly then. So, for instance, in a normal, so we said this already, the scores that fall +1 standard deviation and -1 standard deviation from the mean are regarded as the average performance range, represented by 68.2 under the curve, right? And the scores that fall -1 standard deviation from the mean indicate below average. It shouldn't be -1. Yeah, no, it should be -2. Am I correct, guys? It should be -2 for this one. Because if they're performing, they're performing, if they go from -1 to -2 then they're performing below average. And if they go between -2 to -3, then they're performing far below average. So that is how you estimate, determine. I want to say interpret rather than determine. But that is how you use the standard deviation to determine where in your classroom your student is performing. All right, so the first thing you have to do is work out the standard deviation. And once you know that standard deviation, if it's given to you, fine. But if it's not given to you, you can work it out. And once you work it out, you will be able to determine where the student grade falls, right? Based on the mean, if it is 1 standard deviation from the mean to the right, or 1 standard deviation to the left. And if it is going anywhere between -1 and 1, then you know the student is in the average performing range. But if the student is going below the -1, right, then you know it's far below the average performing range. It's below the average performing range. And if it's going -3, then you know the student is really, really failing. And then if the student is going in the opposite direction, then you know they're going either above average or way above average. Everybody get me there?
Yes,
Those mathematical and understand this better. Can you input? Javon, anything to input? But everyone have an idea of what I'm talking about. So let us look at actual.
One minute.
Contributed.
I was saying I'm not mathematical, but I
Yes.
can share that I learned this long time ago, but it didn't mean
Yes.
anything to me. I was just doing it to pass a test.
Right, right, right.
Later
Well,
on,
myself too, I don't really use it. So it only
later on,
comes up. Hmm?
later on when my son was doing GSAT,
Yes.
somebody from the Ministry of Education came to the school to explain how students would be placed at the high schools that they wanted to go, because people were complaining that their children get high scores and they didn't get to go to their preferred school. He was trying to explain to a auditorium full of average parents standard deviation. Basically saying the ones that score highest at that +3 deviation, those are the ones who get to their preferred school.
Right, right. So what he was saying is if you,
the modal numbers that you're talking about. So
right, right.
90%.
So in other words, he was telling you, where you see me here?
Yes.
That those students are the ones that get the best choices.
Yes.
And the next set is the ones that perform somewhere in this 13.6.
So if your child got say 90%, and that's the average of all the GSAT subjects they had at the time, he might have been pushed out of the 0.3 between 2 and 3 because somebody got 91 and they fall there. So they would fall between 1 and 2, that 13.6.
Right, right, exactly. So a lot of this is why I said to you, even though we don't actually use this graph in our classroom per se, it's a matter of being in the teaching arena and having a basic understanding of the implications of mean and standard deviation, what they really mean in terms of actual performance. Okay? You get me? Because the mean can be here. The mean of the students can be 80 in the middle here, you know, and 1 standard deviation is 10. And so therefore -1 would be what? What would be the score, say where the -1 is deviation? 1 standard deviation from the mean below.
That could be 5.
No, I said the mean was 80.
Oh, 80, I thought I said 10.
80, no, I said 1 standard deviation is 10.
Oh. So that's 70.
70, right. So what that is showing you is that the average range of scores, right? The average performing students would go between 70 and 90.
90.
Right? And they would be regarded as the average performance. And the student know who is getting more than one standard deviation to the right is falling in that segment, right, of the curve, would be in that 13.6, meaning that they are now performing above that 90. And as you know, that's how it goes, right? So that is how you interpret standard deviation and actual performance and real-time performance. So let us go again. So we know now, and I think somebody pointed it out earlier, that what you see to the left there, the extreme left, is the normal curve. And if the curve is skewed positively, meaning it's skewed to the left, what does it mean? It means that you have more people performing at the higher level. You see where the curve go down here? Right? It is positively skewed. Sorry, less people. So this test is probably either badly written or the distribution connotes a difficult test, right? If the students are all doing extremely well, meaning it's skewed to the right here, as you see it, negatively skewed to the right, you notice the loading is more on the right, meaning that more students are performing good, don't it?
The test was easy.
So the test is probably too easy, right? Probably too easy. So, for example, if the mean is 20, look at the little example at the bottom that I put. If the mean is 25 and the standard deviation is 5 then at least 75% of the scores will lie between 15 and 35. Everybody understand that?
No, miss. Can you just repeat that again for me?
All right. Remember, I said to you that the bulk of the average performing scores is in the middle, right? So if one standard deviation is 5, then the average performance of the scores is in the middle here between -1 standard deviation and +1 standard deviation. So if the mean is 25, as in the example, and the standard deviation is 5, then what is the average performing range?
Miss, 20 to
Miss, it's 20 to 30,
Right.
20 to 30, because 5 up and 5 down,
Here,
right?
no? So you would add the standard deviation to the right, 1 standard deviation to the right. So it's 25 plus 5, right? Which would be
30.
And you take off 1 standard deviation to the left, which would give you 20. So it would be between 20 and 30 would be the average. Right? No, I didn't use the 66 here, you know, I was using 75%. So don't look at that. Look at the actual curve. Let's go back to the curve. We said 25 is in the middle here, right? You see my little pointer?
Yes, sir.
Is the mean score. 1 standard deviation to the right is 5. So it's 25 plus 5, right? And 1 standard deviation to the left is 25 minus 5. So that's 20 to 30 is the range of the average. Remember, no, this area this area between -1 standard deviation and +1 standard deviation represents the average performing student. You get me? All right. So I'm going to end now with a little example. So here's an example. In grade 7B, the mean is 25. The standard deviation is 6.05. Where does the performance of a student who gets 30 on the test fall in the class? Who can tell me? Do they fall in the average performance or they fall above average or below average? The standard deviation is 6.05. The students get 30 on the test, one student. Where is that student's performance level? Where would they fall on the curve?
So the right of the mean.
So they would fall to the right? So 25
Within-
plus 6.09 is how much?
31.09.
31.09. You see it right here, guys? So if their score is 31.09, right? If the score is 31.09, are they in the average performance range above the mean or below the mean?
Above.
Above. But, right? Remember now, you know, the student got 30. The student got 30. And when you work out the standard deviation to the right, one standard deviation to the right works out to 31.09 and the student got 30. So what it means is that the student fell to the right of the mean, which is the high performing, which is in the average performance, but the higher end of average performance. Let's look back at I wanted to show you the
Above average, just above average.
They would be somewhere in here. They would be just above average. You're correct. Why? Because when you hit the one standard deviation, no, they would be just below. They would be very much inside the average performance because they scored 30.
Right.
And one standard deviation to the right of the mean, what worked out
31.09.
something. So they would definitely be represented in the average performance of the class. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Understand the interpretation?
Yes, Doc.
Okay, all right. I don't really want to take any more time. That's the problem. Did you want one more example?
Yes, Doc.
Yes,
Doc.
One more.
One more. See another one here. See if you can. It's a hard one. Take a picture and then next week we look at it. No, next week you don't want to look at it. You want to look at it when you go home. And it's 95% on each of our test papers in web development and classroom assessment. So in other words, she's in two separate classrooms. She's doing a course in web development and she's doing another course in classroom assessment, and she got 95 in both of the tests. But, right, the mean score in web development class is 80 and her score is 95. The standard deviation in that class is 25. Whereas the class that she's doing assessment tests into, their mean score is 75 and the standard deviation is 10. Remember, she scored 95 in the two classes, you know. Which classroom is she performing better in? Bet you can't tell me.
The assessment test.
Assessment test.
Assessment test.
Who can tell the class how they came to that? I don't want to guess in business, you know, you have to show us how it works. You have to tell.
It's a standard deviation.
No.
Yes, but how did you work it out? How did you determine it?
Because the mean
one
score
at a
is
time, one at a time.
the mean, yes, the mean score is 75 and the standard deviation is 10. So if we're going to the right, positive side of the standard deviation, it would be 75 plus 10, which would be 85.
Yes.
But her score is 95. which is
Yes.
above 85, which would
Mhm.
be above the average, above the higher end
Average
of
in
the average.
assessment test, right?
By
Okay,
2 standard
explain to the
deviation.
class now why it's higher than, why she performing better than web development, or if she performing the same. Work out that.
In web development test, the mean score is 80, but the standard deviation is 25. 80 plus 25, no.
Yes, you're right. It's 105. It's 105.
105. You can score 105 on a test? Anyway.
All right, let me take it off. You're too miserable.
Yes.
Standard deviation too big.
Right.
Go
So
on
the
now,
mean,
go on.
the mean score is 80 and the standard deviation is 20. So if you add 80 and 20, you will get 100. But her score is 95, which is below, which is
One
not
standard
below,
deviation away. Yeah.
inside. It would be inside the higher end of the standard deviation to the right.
So in web development class, she's only scoring average.
Yes, she's doing average.
But in test classroom assessment, she was
2 standard deviations away.
above average.
Yeah.
Understand? So
Yes.
she's performing better in her assessment classroom than she is in web development classroom. All right, and I think that takes care of that. Next group up, please. I'm gonna stop sharing here.
Miss, but question though, you said that in the last one, the web development one, the standard deviation is 20. I know it's probably a makeup thing.
It's just a makeup thing I did.
Okay, but if the standard deviation is gonna add up to 100, wouldn't you say that the test is too easy then?
I think it's just illustrated the numbers.
Well, yeah.
As opposed to, yeah.
It would have to be, we would have to see how skewed it is for us to determine that. In other words, there would have to be several students scoring about the same for you to determine that.
So we cannot just look at the standard.
No, you couldn't look at one student's outcome. You'd have to look at all of the students on the graph.
Okay.
You'd have to look at all of the students, like what we saw in the graph, to see how the curve is skewed. If more of them is getting about the same in the higher zone. Okay, but it does give you a little indication, right? That in that class, obviously people are scoring high because in that class she only performing at average.
Yes.
You understand? It does give an implication, and you can say that in your interpretation, but you have to be clear that you cannot say definitively. But it does have implications. Okay, that's excellent interpretation, by the way. Okay, can I take this down now? Okay, so thank you very much. I hope everybody has a little bit of an understanding, and then you can follow up with the reading. I think the page numbers were put in the chat. It's here, educational testing and measurement, page 308 and page 292 of your POPHAM. Am I correct there, Jason?
I'll have to check POPHAM doc. I put the notes on the other book. So I look at POPHAM.
Oh, okay. Well, I know it's in POPHAM as well. All right. So next group up, please get ready.
Excuse me, Miss?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I had a question. I'm not sure if it was answered early in the class because I did get in a couple minutes late. But read the assignment for the people who did not administer the test. The validity and reliability. I know there were a couple of people were also asking in the group. Wouldn't we need to have the questions and know the distractors so that we can answer that?
Let the other group go ahead, and I will talk to you after.
Okay.
We are going to we're hoping to get a minute or two to just look at the final assignment. So
Okay, Miss. Thank you.
to hold up the group. So
All right. Hi, good afternoon. Are you guys seeing my screen?
no, we don't see it. Oh yes, it's up now.
No, okay.
You guys not seeing it?
Yes, we see it. We see it.
All right. Shanique, you're up.
Good evening, everyone. I am Shanique Bennett from Group 7A. The members are Sasha Gay Palmer and Kadeen Smith. Will be presenting on grading and reporting, focusing on test outcomes and interpreting percentiles in classroom assessments. Now, we are going to explore the objectives, what we're going to cover today. They are one, to describe the purposes of grading and reporting, to examine goal attainment, find out what it is, describe the types of grading and reporting systems and their advantages and limitations, describe the guidelines for developing a multiple grading and reporting system, develop some form of plan for assigning letter grades, describe how to conduct a productive parent-teacher conference, including how to report on tests. Now we're going to start with what is grading. Now, before I tell you, can anybody tell me what do you think is grading? When you hear grading, what comes to your mind? A word? Is it symbolic for anybody? What is grading?
Problem.
Problem, Joy. So I like that word. Grading is problem, report, reporting. All right, guys, thank you so much. So grading is really an expression of judgment. As Joy stated, problem. So it usually symbolizes some form of letters. And when we talk about letters and numbers or words, we think about reporting. It indicates the degree to which the intended outcomes have been achieved. So we'll get a little bit more into goal attainment. That speaks to the intended outcome. So in simple terms, grading in education, grading overall, is the attempt to apply standardized measures of varying levels of achievement in a course. Yeah, that's critically grading in a nutshell. So the purposes of grading, what make we grade? Can anybody tell me why do you grade? One example. Why do you grade?
To get an idea of the student's comprehension level.
Excellent. To get an idea of our students' comprehension level. Awesome. Thank you so much. So that is one purpose. Sasha, you can skip. Let's explore the purposes together. So the first purpose that we have on the presentation is to communicate how well a student is doing. Same thing that you just stated, Jillian, in several academic as well as non-academic or affective areas. And we got this one from Gallagher 1998. Another purpose is for teachers to find out how well we have taught. So you teach the lesson, you want to find out if your students actually understand. We want to also ensure that the students know that they have learned or maybe they have not learned. They want to find out how can they improve on something. Another purpose, and a lot of people believe this is the essential purpose of grading. This one is to communicate to both students and their parents about students' goal attainment. So the main purpose, according to POPAM, is that students, or the grading rather, should be communicated to both students and parents. That's the main purpose of grading. Another purpose is to provide some form of guidance to teachers for instructional planning and diagnostic purposes, to also provide guidance to students about future work that they're going to do. So the various purposes, as stated before, guys, we know you're not just grading to find out a grade or to find out where the student is. We have to provide report to parents. We have to provide reports to students. And in some cases, we have to provide report to our HODs and other members of staff. Now, we're going to address goal attainment. Now, goal attainment, we're going to look at how does goal attainment grading take place. We have 4 steps to the goal attainment, but before we get to the 4 steps, let's explore what it is. PAPAMs recommend that teachers grade based on goal attainment. Grade based on the goals that you set in your classroom, or the goals that are provided to you. For example, when we look at like the NSC curriculum, most of us, you are provided with goals. The government of Jamaica, they give us a whole curriculum that we should use as a guide, right? So based on that guide, we take out some of the objectives to use in our classroom. So PAPAM recommend that we grade based on the goals that are set or given to us. He states that truly defensible grading requires the teacher to make students' achievement of curriculum A the solidarity consideration in determining the grades to be communicated to students and parents. So what that means is that you must make sure you have your own back, right? When a parent can come to you and say, why did my child rather get this grade? Or the HOD can come to you and say, why did this student get this grade? You should be able to provide some form of backative. You should be able to explore, discuss, provide reasons for the grade that you gave the student. Now, the 4 steps on how goal attainment, how we achieve goal attainment. The first one is to clarify the curriculum goals or the curricular goals. The second one is to choose goal attainment evidence. The third one is weighting goal attainment evidence. And then the 4th one is arriving at the final goal attainment grade. Now we are going to explore the first one. The first one is to clarify the goal. So we want to ensure as teachers to make certain that all the participants in the grading game, and that is mostly our teachers or parents and students, sorry. So we want to ensure that our parents and the students understand the goals. We want to put it in layman terms, make it a little bit more simple. So don't just take it out of the NCQ and say, those are the goals that we're going to work with. Explain it to them. So make sure that the grades, the goals are simplified. Ensure that it is, ensure that what you mean in practice, teachers must always provide understandable renditions of the curricular aims to involve specifically to parents and students. So just break them down. So to truly understand the nature of really the curriculum aim, it is often necessary for us to know the nature of the criteria by which the student's mastery of the aim will be determined. So we must know what we're looking for. So don't just drop down the aim, take it out of the NCQ and call it a day. Know what you are searching for. And oftentimes, guys, it is provided by the department. So for me, I can just speak for me. For me, I don't select the goals. The goals, they are provided by the HOD. So the HOD, she would scan the curriculum and then she would provide the goals for the department. And then you can use the goals that is provided, the goals that are provided by the head of department. We are understanding so far so good, guys. I think I'm going a bit fast.
Yes, so far so good.
Yes.
We're understanding.
Yes, we're
So
understanding.
far so good. All right. Awesome. Great. So now let's go to the second one. Please remember the steps. When I ask you guys what are the steps, we should be able to identify them. So we did the first one, and the first one is to clarify the goals, right? Now the second one is to choose the goal attainment evidence. Choose the goal attainment evidence. Sashage, can you go back to the first slide for me? Can anybody tell me what do you think is the goal attainment evidence? Yes, I can stay there, Sash. Before we explore it, goal attainment evidence. What do you think it be? Any idea? We're not sure. Silent night, holy night.
Demonstration of the understanding of what was taught.
Understanding of what was taught. Warm, not necessarily hot. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We'll get into it, don't worry about it. So you can skip for Mr. Shege. So the goal attainment evidence, you have to first, remember we have to first identify the aim or the goal, right? And then we have to find out what evidence we're going to use. So let me just read what is on the slide. After identifying and describing the curricular aims, goals on which grades are based, the teacher then decides on the evidence that will be used to help arrive at a determination for the student's progress towards the mastery of the curricular aim. So the teacher will decide on the assessment, on the evidence/assessment that you are going to use to achieve the goal. So the first step is to explain the goal. Remember, so we know the goal, we select the goal. So after selecting the goal and explaining the goal to both parents and students, now we have to select the evidence or select the assessment that we're going to use for that goal or for the goals. Are we following? We're connecting the dots and we understand so far? Did I lose anybody?
No, it's
No.
working. We're getting
Yes,
there.
no, maybe
No,
so.
We're getting there.
Getting there. All right. So for example, guys, let's say you have a final exam. So at schools, usually the final exam is weighted heavily. Think about you. If we had a final exam, the final exam would be majority of our grade, right? So it's the assumption in such instances that the more significant the exam, the more influential it would be to the contribution or the judgment of the students' curricular aims. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to find evidence or assessment to actually achieve the goal or to achieve the aim then. So you would determine based on the evidence, based on the assessment, if the students had actually achieved that goal. And that is what it is for step 2. Now we're going to jump to step 3. So step 3 is weighting the goal attainment evidence. So the teachers judge the goal attainment evidence to decide which would be best to support an interpretation of the student's mastery of this particular aim. So at step 2, we knew the assignment. At step 3, we now have to provide some form of weight to the assignment. We have to provide maybe 40%, 50%, give it a number. Give it a percent. So at this step, first off, the teacher decides what the evidence might be to germane to a goal mastery. For example, perhaps there are 2 homework. You gave 2 assignments, and as the teacher, you are, well, you want to find out which one of the assignments actually met the goal attainment. Which one of them do you think is the mastery level for the students? Which one of them do you think actually achieved the goal a bit more? So if you have 5 assignments and your school is only asking you to input 4 grades, now let's use more. If you have, let's say, 10 assignments and your school is asking you to input 5 grades, what you're going to do, you're going to assess all of the assignments, and then you're going to determine what assignments you're going to use, and you're going to see, based on the goals that you had set, based on the goals that you had explained to both the parents and the students, now you're going to find out which one of them assignments here make more sense and match the goals a bit more. Which one out of the 10, and judge it, put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and decide which one of these assignments actually achieve the goal a bit more. Then you would provide some form of weighting according to your selection. Everybody is clear on that one?
Clear.
Questions? We're good?
Yeah.
All right, okay. So let's say, for arguments, that the assignments given in the class gives a better idea about the student's master status. So if you gave a letter to the editor and you gave an argumentative essay, and then you gave a speech, based on the goals that were set, you only need one of them to put on the report then, right? Based on the goals that you had, you're now going to decide out of the 3, which one achieved the mastery status of that goal and the mastery of the student. Based on the evidence provided by either the classroom quiz or the items or the midterm test or the end of term test, what the teacher must do is to decide what weight to give each source of evidence. And in some cases, guys, we probably will not select the weight, and the weighting is probably predetermined by the head of department. And I think it's similar for even Miss, right? She gets an outline and it's already weighted and everything is already done. So oftentimes we are not the persons or the teachers who would select the weighting. We would not select the weighting for it.
Absolutely.
All right,
Guys,
so
do you
we can
see
move
how this, this is aligning with your assignment, right? Students, do you see how this is aligning with your assignment?
Do you see how this is
Yes,
aligning
Doc.
with your assignment?
Oh,
Yes,
okay,
Doc.
good. Continue, Shani.
All right. So we are at, all right, Miss, we're at the final step. So the final step is arriving at the final goal attainment grade. So in this step, if the teacher has a number of goals and maybe have enough assignments as well, based on the evidence, that will be counted more heavily than the less significant assignment evidence of the goal attainment. Sound confusing, so let's break it down. So arriving at a reasonable conclusion with so many things, you have a lot of assignments, you have several goals that you probably achieved. It is now your decision as the teacher to decide on what you're going to do. So in the final analysis, it boils down to actually selecting, and it's probably going to be a lot of work, to be honest. And Papams stated that it's not for the dull-witted, his words, not mine, to actually arrive at the final conclusion. And that's what we're doing at step 4, arriving at the final conclusion, the final grade for the students based on the goals that we selected. And that's it for the 4 steps. Now, I'm going to go to this scenario and I want you to tell me whether or not you think that Sarah actually is a good goal. No, go back, Sash. This one. So it reads, in the Midwest state where Sarah teaches 3rd graders, the state school board has officially endorsed an exceedingly large number of learning objectives. Because Sarah wants to organize her instruction as well as her grading practices around a set of intended curricular outcomes, And because she believes the state's learning objectives are too numerous, she decides to prioritize those objectives by focusing only on a half dozen of the most important ones. Her school district's report cards call only for an overall achievement grade, nor broken down by the particular objective. So Sarah lets all her students and their parents know which objectives she will be using as the chief foci for her instruction and for her grading. A description of each of those 6 objectives, along with 2 sample items that might be used on the test assessing students' achievement of that objective, is sent home with each student's, at the start of the school year. Sarah then grades her students using evidence from formal and informal assessments according to how well she believes a student has mastered the 6 objectives. Although the students and the parents seem to appreciate the way Sarah is grading her students, several teachers in her school chide her for dealing with only 6 objectives out of a state-approved set of 34 third grade objectives. Now, do we believe, is Sarah a good goal attainment gal, yes or no, and why? Based on the explanation of the four steps to goal attainment, did she achieve all 4 of them, yes or no? And then to explain to me, if you say yes, why? If no, why? I'm going to give you guys 1 minute to think about it, and then you can raise your hands and let me know, okay? Reasonable or 2 minutes? I think 2 minutes is more reasonable. Is the instruction clear, guys?
Yes, yes, it is.
Yes, yes, it is. All right. Any answers so far? I probably pick on somebody. Do I have a volunteer? It's what you think, you know, guys. I'll tell you the answer after. Just state what you think. There's nobody here fighting you. It's fine. Give your opinion, give your feedback. Let me see, in a minute, miny, mo. Tanik Clark, do you think Sarah is a good goal attainment gal? Tanik?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, and why do you think so?
I am going to agree with Tanik. I think she is a good.
Okay, Roseanne, you're agreeing.
I think she is a good. Because she first clarified the goal. And then she chose the evidence and followed the steps. That's my comment.
That's my comment.
Where are we getting
Thank you so much.
Where are we getting an echo?
I'm not sure, Doc.
I'm sure, Mr. Still, is it my end?
It wasn't happening before. And I have only opened the thing once, so. Want me to log out and log in again?
You don't need to, Doc. It's
Yes,
Okay,
if
then.
somebody has two devices.
Shanique?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, guys.
Shanique,
Yes,
when
Kaden.
when you don't mute the mic, it
I have to mute when they're talking.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Got it. Roger that. All right. So thank you, Roseanne, and thank you, Tanique. My opinion about it, guys, and Miss probably can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that she's definitely a good goal attainment girl. She identified the goals that she wanted to use. She explained them to both the parents and the students. She went ahead and selected the evidence and also waited and finally arrived at the goal attainment grade. So the only thing that she did is that she did not use all of the goals. And I mean, out of, what was it, 30 something goals? Is it actually practical to use all of them? I don't think so. I don't
Did
think
you look at
we're going to use all of the goals that are set. In this one, Miss, I didn't.
He usually
I
has a response. But I agree with you. Go back to what you start, what he outlined. The GGAG. Go back to the very first where you started the steps for the class, so that you just reinforce. The first thing is that you just reiterate for them, because what did he say about clarifying your curricular goal? You must understand the aims first, and then go on. And then you select, right? Choose you choose the goal attainment evidence after identifying and describing the curricular goals on which grades are to be based. The teacher then decides on the evidence. So did he mention that, you know, what you would do is, I mean, in any curriculum, it is, remember, it's a recommended set of objectives that is outlined as a kind of master sheet to guide the teacher. But the teacher does not necessarily have to incorporate all of those objectives. And in fact, sometimes the teacher might even want to add where the teacher feels that what is given as the master set of guidelines might be just a little bit amiss in certain areas. I've seen it happen time and time again where the student is writing the lesson plan and developing the objectives, and they are able to strike higher order objectives that are not necessarily outlined in the master curriculum. Is anybody here who is teaching that has had that experience? And what is your experience as teachers, those who are in the classroom, in your use of the curriculum guide? Do you find that you use all of the objectives there, or that you will make a selection based on your classroom lesson? Can somebody give us some who is in the classroom here that uses the Ministry of Education, the guidelines, the curriculum?
I'm in the classroom, and I teach chemistry, but sometimes if you look at most times, when you look at the syllabus, the topics are not aligned in order. So I would, when I'm writing my lesson or teaching, I would rearrange the objectives that are in the syllabus and also add objectives where we see fit, because sometimes they ask you to probably calculate concentration, but you have to find some other things before you reach to the concentration level.
Right.
So,
Well, remember, no, that is the final. They're striking the highest. So sometimes there are steps that have to be taken beforehand.
yes, so I
That
include
have
that.
to be attained before.
I include that in a part of the objective as well, even though it's probably not in the syllabus, but I would make some objectives to account for the steps before.
And is there anybody else? Thank you so much for that, Janelle. What about the fact that they give a guideline, like a set of objectives, but you don't necessarily use all of them? I want to know if anybody can relate to that. Who is in the classroom? No one? No one can relate as a teacher? Well, I can tell you that oftentimes there is more than enough for you to select objectives from, and sometimes you still have to tweak some of them to suit your classroom teaching for a better fit, just as Janelle was, or create some new ones, right? So it's a matter of you, the teacher, creating the best fit. Yes, you do have some basic guidelines, but they are not in the guidelines do not necessarily fit every classroom, right? Lessons. So you are the teacher that knows your students, understand what the overarching aims and main objective of the lesson plan is going to be about, what the final aims are and objectives, the general objectives. And so you can tweak and add to and subtract as you see necessary to fit the overarching goals. Continue.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Miss. So in sum, the first one, guys, the first step is to really clarify your goals. And as Miss stated, sometimes, guys, the goals, well, not sometimes, the goals are not created equally. We'll have to tweak them. We'll probably have to make changes to ensure that it is suitable for our classroom as the teacher, right? So many teachers promote the students' attainment of several aims, and the curriculum, we now have to identify what aims you think is more important than others, and that's perfectly acceptable, right? However, this must be communicated with your class, must be communicated with the parents. So when we clarify our goals, or we decide on them and we understand them and we make any changes to them, remember the first step, we are explaining to both our parents and our students. So if the teachers try to make their grading decisions transparent, we have to ensure that it's not, what Papa call it again, cloud clocked. His words, not mine. And we have to ensure that we announce, we announce it to our audience, and our audience, our target audience is always the parents and the students. So those aimed at the more important aims, remember it's our decision to decide on what we consider as more important. Still at the first step, Decide on the more important goals, tweak if necessary, explain it to both or parents and students. Now, to choose the evidence, you're choosing your assessment that you want to use for those goals that you explained to your stakeholders. The weight is usually decided by the department, by the school, but if I don't know, if you're presented with the opportunity to weight it, you decide if based on the assessment, if it actually targeted, achieved the goals that you decided at step 1, and then you weight accordingly. And then the final step is to provide the final grade. And that's it for the 4 steps to achieve or goal attainment. Do we all understand? That's a little bit of summary of the goal attainment. Do we understand it, guys? We'll be moving on to the next part of our presentation. Don't let us move on if you don't understand. Clear? All right, thank you. Thank you, Razan. I'll now hand over to Sasha again. Thank you.
Hi, so this is my part of the presentation. Are you guys hearing me?
Yes, Sasha.
Hello?
You, Sasha, again.
All right, so grading involves a number of elements that vary from your style of teaching and preference of grading strategies, the course content, and how you perceive success in your class. So Frisbee and Waldman developed an instructional module to help teachers develop defensible, effective, and fair grading practices. So what you're seeing on the slide are practical steps for assigning grading systems. So the first one says to develop a personal grading philosophy. So a grading plan is something that is personal to you as the teacher. It requires you to apply personal values and attitudes to the plan. So for example, if you think your student deserves a passing grade, then it is up to you to give them a passing grade. However, it must be in line with the school's policy or the school's grading plan that they have in place. So moving on to point 2, you should implement the district policy if one exists. So if the school has a grading system, then the teacher should follow that grading plan. I think Miss does that as well. We have a grading system at UE, and so she has to adhere to the grading system that is set in place. Point 3, choose an appropriate frame of reference for interpreting what the grading symbols mean. So for example, criteria and reference test versus the group reference test. So as a teacher, you should decide if you will grade your students based on specific objectives that was met for or that was set for each class, or will you grade them against each other or as a group? The other step is to develop benchmarks for what your grading system means by consulting with colleagues who are familiar with the students' community and the curriculum. So if you're a new teacher like myself, I'm not there, but if you're a new teacher and you're in a school and you're not very familiar with the grading system that is there, you can consult other colleagues or your HOD to check the curriculum and to ensure that you are following the system that is in place. So it's a continuation. You should decide on the type and number of grading components. So teachers should decide what aspect of their lesson will be graded and what will be just formative assessment. So if students are allowed to submit draft material, will that count towards the final grade? How do you handle test items which the majority of the students missed? How do you combine all grades earned in the class? So these are important questions that we must ask. Moving on, weight the components to reflect their differential importance. As we already know, some topics in a unit plan are a bit more heavier than some in terms of context and activities. So in terms of weighting in the assessment, we need to know which aspect of the unit plan we spend most time teaching, so that at the end of teaching, when we have the summative assessment, we would know which topics need to be weighted more and which topics need to be weighted less. Record scores in the grade book. This is an important step for grading. It keeps the students and teachers on track. Before computers, teachers wrote in books, but they're now moving away from that. I guess most of us is used to that since we were in primary school. I don't know if you guys remember the long books that the teachers used to write in. Anybody have any idea of how those look?
We still have some of them now, such a game.
All right, well, they're moving.
Whether we're online, we still have to bring them in.
They're moving away from that. So there are softwares now that can assist with record keeping. And so it cuts down on the record keeping time and, you know, probably a little less work for us teachers. And the final step is for you to prepare your grades and reports. This is done when the teacher prepares the report cards for parents to see their children's status. So everybody clear on the practical steps for assigning grading system? Any questions? Yes, no, maybe so?
Question. I want to know the name of the software that you use for the record keeping, because I still have
Girl, I'm I'm still looking for that as well. Papa didn't give me any, and I'm not sure if any yet. But as soon as I find out, I'll let you know.
Okay.
All right, moving along. So let's look at.
Let me just interject very briefly there.
Okay, look.
Most common type of software is not software, it's just an Excel sheet. We oftentimes use Excel sheets, you know, and you have the calculative part of it, where you just drop formulas, and it adds up, subtracts whatever you need it to do. You just put in the formula, right? And copy and paste the whole entire columns, and it automatically works out the grades and adds and works out the ratios and those things. It's normally Excel that we know what we use.
All right, so for the person who asked the question, this just gave you an idea.
Yeah, well, you use Excel a lot.
Okay.
Sasha,
yes.
Before you move on, Sasha, so let me just ask a question, right? So Julian said same would love that record keeping site too. So for those who are teachers, you guys don't use RenWeb or My School Jamaica to put in the scores, which would calculate. I mean, we use it for reports, but it does calculate the. Yeah, so it does calculate the averages based on the assessment, because we'd have multiple assessments, calculate the averages, and then add it to the next assessment and add it to the final exam, and then we get a final score. You guys don't have those softwares that you use for grading?
Yes, Kadeen, for high school, I think all of us, we have to use the My School Jamaica. We have to input it on Legacy, right? Because I know I have to do that for my school.
And some use RenWeb now.
And some use RenWeb now. Yeah.
Yeah, they use RenWeb at Champion.
So we have
it's just that we have to do both. We have to put in the book and we have to put on the software as well.
One at a time, guys.
Yes, we have to use both of them. Yeah, it takes a lot of time, but we have to do both of them.
I know that we do use Excel at UE, but I think there is a software for the formal group mark sheets, right, Sasha?
Yes, there is.
But
you guys have to sit and configure.
Yeah, I don't know the name, but we still have to set it up ourselves. We still have to go in and modify and put in.
And then the system checks for you. But
And then
yeah.
it just automatically, but to me, it works the same as the Excel.
Yeah, it does.
We can even import our Excel sheet into it or export it as an Excel sheet.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Sasha.
All right, so let's look at 3 common grade giving approaches, namely absolute grading, reflective, relative reference, relative grading, and aptitude-based grading. So these approaches can be used not only for end of term or end of year grades, but also for grading the classroom assessment performances and assignments of students during the school year. So as teachers, we do that, but we just don't, I suppose you guys know how to do it, but you guys don't know the correct names for them per se. Or as students, we have experienced this in some way or the other. Okay. All right, so absolute grading, it is performance to specific standards then. So a grade is given based on a teacher's idea of what level of student performance is truly necessary to earn, for instance, an A. For example, if an English teacher has established a perfect level of proficiency needed for an A grade, and in a class, no student performs at the A level of proficiency, then no student will get an A. However, this approach does have its advantages and disadvantages. So some advantages of absolute grading are raw scores on the components are tallied and converted to obtain a percent. You guys will see this when I move on to the next slide. It lowers competitiveness among students. It is clear, easily communicated. It is most useful when performance can be expressed in standard physical units of measurement to facilitate absolute standards that can be divided into categories. So for example, percent of words spelled correctly on a spelling test. A disadvantage of this approach is that meaning of grades is unclear. Learning in relation to learning outcomes is uncertain. All right, so this is tracking scores for components and weights. So guys, I'm not a math person. I'm going to try and explain this as best as I can. So here we're looking at one student's grade for science. So column 1 shows the science grade component. Column 2 shows the total score for each component. Column 3 shows Richard's raw score weight, which is the number of questions Richard answered correctly. Column 4 shows the weighting of that component. And column 5 shows Richard's weighted score. So I want you guys to listen to me clearly because I have a little activity after this on this for you. So in order to arrive at that number, we would multiply the raw score. Yeah, we would multiply the raw score, which is 83 times the weight of the component, which is 2.5. And that would give us the 207.5. You guys understand what I just said?
Yeah.
All right. So in column 6.
Jolene, can you mute your mic,
We can hear
please?
talking about is Kellyanne.
The whole bunch of what was Kellyanne, man. Shouldn't I use the word?
Jolene.
The glass part where the two send they don't.
Jolene.
Hold on, Auntie. Oh, so sorry. I'm so sorry. I am so sorry.
Okay, it's okay. All
Question.
right, so.
Before you continue, question.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that you used the percentage? Why didn't you use a percentage?
I guess so. What you mean, the percent method?
Yes. Because if the weight, I'm looking at it, I'm saying if the weight is 0.2, right? 2.5, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't his score be at most 2.5? His weight being at most 2.5, sorry?
So hold on, let me finish and explain this, and then I get back to you. Okay. All right, where was I? No, so I was saying no. In column 6, we have the weighted total score. So in order to arrive at this 250, we would multiply the weight, which is 2.5, times the total score, which is 100. And that would give us this 250. So after that calculation is done for, hello? Okay, moving on.
Just pick up in Sasha again to answer Javon, right? The weight, it could have been done in percent. If you wanted it that way, it's your preference, right? If you prefer to use percent, you can go ahead. Now, this was in the presentation that Miss used, so we just went ahead and used the same thing. So if you want to weight it and use percent, you can go ahead and do so.
Do it with the percent and so the class can, so we can see it. So the class can see it. Do it the other way too, Shani.
All right, Miss, hold on. Let me
Oh, you want to finish this first?
Yes, I'm not.
Right,
I'm
go
getting
ahead.
to the, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so when all that calculation is done for all the components of the subject, then it will be converted to an overall percentage for reporting to students. So the grade expressed as a percent would be Richard's weighted score, which is the, which is the 1302 divided by the 1500 times 100, which is the total score. So his percentage would be 86.8%. This is the numerical option after we have done all the calculations. So the percent to grade conversion scale for letter grade would be a B. This is based on the school's conversion scale. So what you're looking at down here is what, well, most schools use. The 93 to 100 would be an A, or 95 to 100 would be an A. Yeah, so that's it. Oh, additionally, letter grades should not be assigned until the end of the marking period, and different schools or different institutions have different grading systems. This is we got this from Popham's book that was also in Mrs. presentation. So you guys can see what an A represents, B represents, C, D, and F represents. And then at the very bottom, you see the percentages. All right, so I'm hoping you guys understood what I just said, because we're going to do a little activity.
Could you go back to the table, please, 1 second, please?
Hold on, Javon. Javon, me can't check in also where you ask me. Yeah, continue. Oh, you guys can take a screenshot of this if you wish, so you can have it to use. Good now, Javon. I can move on from the table.
Yes, you may.
All right, and you guys can take a screenshot of this, well, a formula or calculation so that you can have it to use for the numerical option. All right, Miss Smith, you can go ahead with your class activity.
All right, thanks, Sasha K. All right, guys. So before we start the activity, I just want to say to Javon, I would not advise you to use a percentage because what typically happens is that we tend to round up whenever we work with percentages. When you do this particular activity, you'll notice that when you calculate the weighted score, there's not much of a point, etc. value coming after, right? So it would be best to work with the raw scores first because as you see, towards the end, there's a percentage done. Jonathan got X amount out of the total score and then you work the percentage. So to avoid error, do 1 percentage calculation. All right, so for this activity, we have worksheet 1, presentation, test 1, test 2, a lab, drawing, and final examination. Now, each of them have the total score out of 100. And in the third column, we have how much, yes, Julian. And then in Jonathan's column, well, in this column, we have the amount that Jonathan got out of that 100, all right? In the fourth column, we have the weight. So the worksheet has a weight of 1 in terms of the total, how much it would count to the final grade, right? And you notice all the way to 4, the final exam has the biggest weight or the largest weight. So what you guys are expected to do is to calculate Jonathan's weighted score based on the information that is provided in the table, as well as the weighted total score. And when you get his total weighted score, you are going to calculate the percentage and also what letter grade would Jonathan receive based on his grades.
Yes, miss.
Okay, all right. So I think we can just give you guys about maybe 5 to 10 minutes. I'm not sure if you need 10, but about 5 minutes. That sounds doable.
It's good.
All right, so just gonna give you guys 5 minutes and we can discuss. All right, to make sure that everybody arrived at the same figure.
Kadeen, Sasha Gate, Kadeen, you seem to know a little more about this. Is this the way that it's typically done in our schools?
I think each school is different. I was actually trying to make it mimic what we do at my school, but that didn't quite work out because for my school, we have assessment 1, assessment 2, and the final exam grade, right? Counting towards, for example, December report. However, there are 3 pieces of assessment that counts towards assessment 1. There are 3 pieces of assessment that counts towards assessment 2. And each of those 2 assessments value 20% of the final score, and then the exam is 60%. But it would be a lot more work and a lot more explaining, so that's why I did it a little bit simpler based on the previous table that I showed you guys before.
Yeah. Because not everybody understands the mathematical part of it.
Yeah.
So it might rely to some extent on your being in a school and somebody sort of showing you, giving you a little bit of a lesson in how to calculate the equivalent scores. Because oftentimes the raw score that the student gets is not necessarily aligned with the equivalent score or the weighted score, which is what Katie is trying to explain here. Understand, class? So you definitely might have to just get somebody to show you if you don't understand how to do it, how to align the grade, this raw scores with the equivalent scores, with the weighted scores that the school require. Exactly. Each school is different. But you do, class, you understand the difference between the weighted score, the raw score and the weighted score though, right? Or the weighted total score. Understand the concept based on even this class, the classes you're doing at UWI now. You notice that your assignments, the raw scores are out of a different number, a different total than the weighted final score. Understand? So you have to work out the equivalent. Nobody is responding to me, so.
Doc, we're trying to work it out.
Yeah, okay, no problem. We just want you to
have an idea.
Understand the concept, yes. So that when you go in, you don't go in blind. You know, "Oh, I've never heard of this yet. I have no clue what you're talking about." You know, you might have to say, listen, can you just show me how you do yours? But at least you have a notion that there is such a thing.
Miss Smith, sorry for my noisy background, but could I see the letter assignment? I think it's in the previous slide.
Previous session.
So what A represents what B represents what C. Where do I go? Okay, thank you. Oh, no, not that one.
What you
That's
mean,
that's what I got,
Yeah,
Julian.
man, this
Before in the previous slides.
Yeah, this one tells me to.
Oh,
Oh,
this
this
one?
one. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. I just need to screenshot it real quick, although Miss sent it to us.
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
These pages are taken from POPAM. So you
Yes, Miss, I mentioned that, so they have it.
And remember, he's writing from a different type of educational system, you know? So there's going to be some differences.
All right, guys. It seems as though you guys are finished. We are about to recognize that some of us are not very good at math, right? Because it seems as though everybody in the chat is getting a similar answer than I did, right? So let's just go on to the next one. But still get the basic idea though, even though the total is a little bit off. All right, so
Something must be wrong with your calculation.
yeah, that's what I'm saying, because I'm realizing that we have completely different. You guys have something similar, and which is different from what I have.
All the numbers are positive, but the summative and figures wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, look at drawing. That one is wrong. For Jonathan,
Drawing.
score.
Oh
is one.
yes.
Yeah, that's where you got it. And then it will take you up to 1,054 instead of the
Okay.
142.
Look at
And
that.
then-
We are
Good, so
all
you guys
understanding.
understanding.
Great.
I thought you said I weren't good at math.
We are not.
You have
We're
challenged
not.
them. And they have
Yeah,
risen
or
to the
thing
challenge.
called calculator.
Yes.
Right.
Let me tell you, Miss assignment has been challenging me, and I need to get there, so I'm putting it out there. And
Okay. The math group charges tutoring fees.
Math and science students is supposed to bring
Apologies, yes, science group too.
bring them.
All right, Sasha, you can continue.
All right, guys, so we're moving on to the second approach to grading, which is relative grading. So this is in performance in relation to group members. So a grade is given based on how students perform in relation to one another. Thus, for any group of students, there will be the best and the worst performances. Those students who outperform their classmates will get high grades regardless of the absolute quality of the students' performances. On the contrary, because some students will always score relatively worse than their classmates, such low scorers will receive low grades no matter what. The system of grading is somewhat similar to a norm reference approach to assessment. So some advantages of this type of grading is that it facilitates reporting student achievements by learning outcomes. Criterion cutoffs may be expressed as percentages or ratios. For grading purposes, performance or percent correct on overall test is not as important as performance in relation to mastery of specific outcomes demonstrated or achieved. A periodic report card may be used to report progress. Most of us, we get report cards at the end of each semester. You know, when parents go to the schools to pick up their children's report cards. So yeah. A disadvantage of this approach is setting the criteria for acceptable performance. So mastery is difficult and it must be specified for each task. So this table is a comparison between two grading scales. And I got this from an article written by David Frisby and Christy K. Waltham. So we're seeing on this slide, we see a comparison between the absolute grading scale and the relative grading scale. So as you can see, the absolute grading scale has a point value system, but the relative grading system, well, does not. All right, so moving on to the third approach. So this is performance in relation to learning ability or amount of improvement. So a grade is given to each student based on how well the student performs in relation to that student's academic potential. So for example, if a particularly bright student outperformed all students in class, but still performed well below assessment-based grading, what the teacher believed the student was capable of, the student might have been given a B, not an A. In order to grade on aptitude, of course, the teacher needs to have an idea of what the student's academic potentials are. So an advantage of this way of grading is that it tends to level the playing field by grading students according to their innate gifts and thereby encourages students to fulfill their potential. A disadvantage is the difficulty of deciding on just what each student's academic potential is. Therefore, this leads to subjectivity. So, do you guys have any questions on the two approaches so far? Anyone jumps out at you? All right, I guess not. Moving along. All right, so a student's effort is educationally important. So if a teacher can inspire students to put effort in their school and non-school endeavors, then those will be better students in the future. So students who believe the level of their effort will make the most difference in success will be students who are more likely to succeed than their classmates who rely on luck to carry them through life. So what do you think about effort in the classroom? Should students be graded based on efforts? And what you're seeing on the screen is a little example. So it reads, Carl Kramer teaches second graders at 12th Street Elementary School. He's been doing so for 6 years. During the past year, however, Carl has seriously been reconsidering his whole approach to grading. This reconsideration was stimulated by 3 students who in the past would have been placed in form of special needs program, but now have been included in Carl's second grade class. Although the 3 students, Mark, Floyd, and James, are having difficulty with much of the content treated in the class, all 3 are obviously trying hard to succeed. In fact, if Carl were to guide and grade on effort alone, the 3 students would probably get the highest grades in class. In the past, Carl has given no credit for student effort when grades were awarded. Now, however, he finds that he's rethinking that decision. Now, if you were Carl, with those 3 students in your class, what would you do? Would you grade your students based off efforts? Hello? Anyone teaching in the classroom, would you grade your students based on effort and not on the work that they actually do?
Good evening, everyone. I have graded based on effort before because sometimes you have some students who participate a lot in class, they're very vocal, they can explain the topic, but somehow when they get the test, they just underperform. To bring them up to par with the others, sometimes I assign a class participation grade or just a general grade, just one score to say, okay, based on their own potential, how I see them perform.
All right, thank you for that. Anybody else? No one else has ever graded their students based on effort?
Yeah, I've done that as well. It's basically the same thing in terms of grading them based on participation levels, how vocal they are. Yeah, because you sometimes have it a case where they understand the information well enough to explain it, but in terms of testing, they might not test well. So to kind of just create a balance, you don't just use straight effort straight across the board. Still use the regular assessment, but you kind of mix it up to kind of give them a fairer chance.
A fair chance.
Yeah.
All right. So this is coming from Wormelli. He points out that we don't have a commonly accepted, legally justifiable, non-subjective method for measuring how hard or sincerely someone is working. Therefore, teachers who try to incorporate effort into their students' grades are usually fooling themselves. This is from research, this is not from me. They simply can't arrive at an accurate identification regarding a student's effort associated with an assignment. So I'm assuming that they're saying that because we shouldn't do that. What do you guys think?
I want to piggyback on what you stated. I think Julian just said it. We can't just grade solely on effort, even if we're including it. Maybe it can be 5%, 10% for participation, but it's no way we can say we're going to grade the students entirely. 80% or 50% or even 30% of their grade is based on effort. It's not fair to the other students.
It wouldn't be fair to the rest of the students.
So that's basically that's what I was saying. You don't necessarily use everything for effort. You just assign a portion of it based on just your judgment and stuff like that.
So let me just interject here and see if I can clarify this a little bit. We have to be careful. I mean, if it's a special education class where are being assessed on the same basis or platform, that may be more focused on effort and oral competencies, then it's different, right? But in a regular classroom, we have to be very careful because we have to maintain a fairly standardized way of assessing. So how do you think we could compensate and be inclusive of the different competency levels and learning styles in a situation like that? Because really that's what it comes down to. Yes,
using alternative assessments.
So you could lose,
right?
So
you're going to mix it up, right? You can use alternative ways of assessing, right? And you can make sure that you use different approaches to assessing. Now, why would you do that? Why is it that in this class, for instance, we have a combination of written, oral, you get where I'm going, and whatever type of different assessments we feel we need depending on what our class model looks like, who and who are part of the class. The whole idea is to be able to vary your assessment in such a way that it compensates and balances out, right? And takes under consideration the different competence levels, right? And multiple intelligences to as much as we can, right? We don't have singing and here, but we do have presentation skills that are needed, oral skills, written skills. You get where I'm going? So
mathematical skills.
Mathematical skills.
Right. So the idea, right, especially in a classroom of younger children in regular, like high school, basic school types of classroom, we're not talking higher education now, which is a completely different platform. But think to yourself, one way to really, hold on a minute, Javon, let me finish talking. One way to try and balance and equalize and compensate as much as we can for those different competency levels. Remember, we mentioned it before, is to differentiate the learning in such a way that those who are not so good at, say, the written will do better at the oral, and so they will get higher mark in the oral and maybe lower mark in the written, and it will balance out with the student who does better in the written and is more nervous in the oral. You get where I'm going? So that is one way to try and see how you can compensate for the different competence levels in your classroom. Yes, Javon.
Question, why do you think that you mentioned a while ago that at the tertiary level it's a total different thing, but
Well,
why is that so?
It is somewhat different, Javon, because
I know what occurs, but I'm
going. Yes.
In terms of you are all your life, for you're going to school from you're 2-3 years old, and you have been a hands-on learner, right? So what would change between your 6th form years and your university level? Shouldn't therefore be some allowances as well?
There is plenty of allowance. There's plenty of allowance for that.
Is there adequate allowance?
Assessments. That's why we combine the assessments, and we have different forms of assessment together, lumped together towards your final assessment. But when you enter higher education now, you have different types of higher education institutions as well. So if you are very, very hands-on, coming from, say, a very technical background, it might suit you to enter an institution that is more geared towards that than one that is very academic, right? So you have different universities with different focuses, right? So it depends on what your choice of courses are or what the focus of that institution is. So that is on a completely different platform. We're just talking on a very basic level in, say, when children are starting out in the classroom, and we are just starting to recognize, the variabilities in skills and competencies and so on. And some of them might even eventually need special attention, right? And special attention and maybe special be placed in special institutions that's more geared towards them, like more technical, streamed into that. It depends on what we are seeing and to what extent there is that variance then, or that need for special assistance. So, but we're just talking now on a basic level where you do have variations in the classroom, and these are students that are at the basic level, and you're starting to really recognize, because you have to be also careful that you assess. Assessment is a very, very tricky thing, and it's very hard to get it perfect and right. But at the same time, we are held accountable, right? And so we have standardized, standardized models that we have to adhere to. So where you're talking about mastery, right? Academic mastery of the content, we have to be careful how we grade for, say, effort, because it does not connote mastery. And so it might be very misleading. And remember now that these outcomes are used for further assessment and evaluation to make special decisions. So you have to be careful, right? You have to be very careful there. Okay. All right, so can we move on?
Okay. All right, so we are going to move on to the second part of the presentation, which is reporting. Shanique, you may go ahead.
Good evening again, everyone. We're going to start with reporting. And when you hear reporting, one word that comes to your mind. One word, reporting. Mercy, Jason said. Jason said mercy. So mercy for the second part of the presentation or mercy for reporting? I'm assuming it's the second part. Okay, it's unrelated. What's reporting? Go ahead, Kimberly.
Is it probably analysis?
Analysis. Okay, thank you so much.
Giving
So report
feedback?
to you,
Okay,
you hear analyze, providing feedback. I like
Yeah.
that one, Jason. Feedback. Thank you so much. So reporting is really the process of providing feedback, right? We need to communicate. As we stated in the goal attainment, we always must communicate with our parents and our students. So reporting is the process used to communicate or provide some form of feedback about the assessments that the students did throughout a specific period of time. So maybe it's from September to December. Not sure how your school does it, but for my school, they have 3 reports for the 3 semesters. Some schools, it's only 2 reports, right? From September to December, and then from January to June, July. So we are going to go to the purposes of reporting, and then we're going to actually look at a report card. So why do we need to provide a report? The first purpose is to communicate to the students, communicate about their achievements to both their families, the post-secondary institutions. For example, when we want to matriculate to university, you probably need something from your high school. You need some form of transcript to provide information to possible employers. For example, in primary school, when parents come to the school to collect report cards from the teachers, the report card itself serves as a progress report, serves as information for the status of their child or their children. So that is one purpose of the report. Another purpose is that we provide some form of systems that must communicate clear information about the skills a student has mastered or the areas where they need more help, more practice. So we need to know where that specific student is in regard to all the subject areas, in regards to not only their subject area, but mannerism as well. Oftentimes, as we would see in the example that will come up next, oftentimes it's not only the grades that are there. Teachers provide feedback, especially in high school, primary school, basic schools. Teachers provide feedback about their mannerism, their attitude, their attendance in class. So the report is not only a progress for the grades, but it provides an overall view of what the student did throughout that term. Then we're going to look at the example of the report, and I'm going to turn over to Kadeen, who will go through the various examples of reporting. Kadeen?
Shanique, repeat the last part of what you said. I didn't hear that part.
Are you seeing the report?
Yes,
The
yes,
example
yes.
of the report? Yes. So just go through that.
All right, so I can barely see anything on my screen, but let me try. All right, so all right, so this is an example of a report
Can you bring
card
it,
from.
can you bring it up a little bit?
I'm trying to do that, but I'm not sure how to zoom this up in SlideShare.
You would have to go to the bottom of your screen and increase the.
No, I'm not seeing that option any
To the
at
right
all.
of your regular computer, to the very bottom.
No, it keeps changing.
You have to come out of SlideShare.
Oh Lord.
All right, go to view options. You can go to view options. It don't give you any, it gives you a ratio. You can either fit to the window or you can go up.
Oh, hold on. What did I just do? Oh, no. Right.
But I see that you have those three little dots you see to the top right there. At the very
This?
top. Yeah, click on it.
This is.
Huh? So you can zoom up
Right. Hold on.
for her. No, it's zooming out.
No, this is not working.
Oh, not working. Okay.
No.
I've used it before.
No.
Well, go to the zoom view options then and see if you can.
Hold on.
From up there.
I'm trying to make it as big as I can here. Hold on.
Can't see it still.
Hold on. Can you see it now?
Little better, yes.
Guys, can you see that?
Yes, that's a little better.
A little better, yeah, yes.
Right.
All right. So continuing, this report card is showing one of the types of reporting in the traditional system. You will notice that for each subject, right, there are particular grades assigned, and then there is also a letter grade system. And to the bottom, it gives you a key to tell you, okay, A, 90 to 100%, A minus 80 to 89, and so on and so forth. Now, with this, I'm not sure if everybody's report is similar to this one, but there's a section for teachers' comments, right, where there are some number keys, and it's to the extreme right, which we're not able to see everything so clearly. But number 1, for example, says that the student is a hard-working and capable student. Number 2 would say that the student works consistently and is making progress, right? So this report is telling us a little bit more about how the student operates, right? And it's more than just using the grade letter system, because the grade letter, sometimes what they do is that they merge both, for example, effort and the final grade into one grade, one letter grade, right? And that cannot give us a big picture, because it might be that the student got a very good grade in the subject, but they didn't really put out much effort, right? So it's important to separate the two, which I will mention a little bit down in the presentation. You can, yes, thank you. All right, so there are, well, we came across 3 different types of grading and reporting systems: traditional letter grade system, the pass or fail system, or a checklist of objectives. Next slide, please. All right, so for the traditional letter grade system, a letter grade is used to assign a single letter grade. So it can be A, B, C, D, and F typically, right? And as undergrads at UWI, if you're an UWI undergrad, we'd normally have A, B, C, and then we'd have different types of failures. So F1, F2, FE, FT, right? So for each subject. So sometimes even a single number can be used. Now, the advantages of using the letter grade system is that it is concise and convenient, and you can easily average the scores. And it can also be used to predict future achievements. However, some limitations are that They typically are a combination of achievement, effort, work habits, and good behavior, as I was mentioning on a previous slide, right? And the proportion of students assigned each letter grade varies from teacher to teacher. And the last limitation is that they do not indicate a student's specific strength and weakness in learning. All right, so now we have the pass or fail system. This is a 2-category system used in some high schools and colleges. The purpose of this system is to encourage students to explore new areas and to take elective courses under a pass or fail option that is not included in their GPA. If any of you were in SciTech and you would have taken critical, I believe it was critical reading and writing, a few years ago before it was changed, we used to have the pass and fail for that particular course, right? And it didn't count towards our GPA, but we did still need to pass it, right? Now, with this system, it removes the fear of a low GPA because it does not count towards your GPA, right? And it gives students greater freedom to select their learning experience. Now, suppose a student wants to try out a particular subject that they might not have any base for, right? They're just trying out something new to see if, okay, maybe I could try this and so on. So it allows students to the freedom to select their learning experience. So they can try new things without it affecting their GPA score. Now, the limitations for this is that it provides no indication of the level of learning. And that is because it's just a pass or fail, right? Regardless of the grade, once you pass, you get a P. It does not predict future achievements, and the study effort study effort is directed towards merely passing the course. You just want to pass. And even with some of the courses that we do now, even though there is a letter grade associated and it's not just pass and fail, we sometimes just try to merely pass, right? But certain things are not grasped. We just want to pass it and get it over with. So that's one limitation of the pass and fail system. And the last one, all right, so the last one is a checklist of objectives. So students are rated using either A, B, C, D, or F, or they can be rated O for outstanding, S for satisfactory, P for proficient, N needs improvement. All right, so this is one example. So for the subject reading, right, the objectives could be reading with understanding, works out meaning and use of new words, reads well with others, reads independently for pleasure. So based on the students, how the students has operated during the school year, right, you could rate the student as being either O for outstanding, right? So their reading level is outstanding, or it could just be satisfactory, all right? So based on these objectives, students are graded as O, S, P, or N based on their level. And it's the same thing for the arithmetic. Now, the advantages is that it provides a detailed analysis of the student's strengths and weaknesses, right? Because it's based on objectives, you can see what area in reading the student would need to improve on. And it provides students, parents, and others with a frequent reminder of the objectives of the school. So the others that it's referring to is, for example, the administrators, because you know that the report is not just for the parents and the students, right? Administrators, counselors, they also, the report is also for them. So it provides them with a frequent reminder of the objectives of the school. And for the limitations, keeping the list of statements down to a workable number is sometimes a challenge. And also stating objectives in simple and concise terms, that can also be a challenge. All right, any questions before I start developing multiple grading systems?
Excuse me.
Yes,
Ladies?
Joy?
Hi, I'm just wondering how much more you have because it's 7:10 and I have to go and we haven't heard about the assignment yet. How many more slides we're looking at?
We have quite a few. So Doc?
We have 47 slides. We're at 38 now.
Yeah. So
we're almost done. It's a lot. Sorry, guys.
If
I think we're almost done.
Doc, are you still here?
I'm here. I was just saying let's stop here and we'll finish up next week.
Okay, then.
On presentation next week. Shouldn't be that long. So whatever we need to finish off, we'll finish off this little bit and we'll finish off the tutorial, the 10 minutes of tutorial on Romars and Prisan, okay? Because we only have one presentation and that should not be that long.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, so let's just cut it here. I just want to quickly look at the assignment, the final assignment, alternative assessment. Can you stop sharing, please? All right, for the first assignment, there was a question asked. I went back to it. I don't see any issue with it. The way the question was posed was obviously a misinterpretation of the question.
Doc, I didn't look at the question, I looked in the rubric. So on the item analysis, it says thorough discussion on the distractors that include recommendations.
The distractors, you were given a set of, you were only given the, you were only given
the answer option.
And she only sent the test papers she only sent the scores, right?
Yes, correct.
And you said we didn't need the items.
No, well, what you have to do is you don't have to identify, they're not asking you to identify the particular distractors. They're asking you to discuss the distractors.
Yes, and that's the thing. It says
you don't need a test paper for that.
Discuss distractors that include recommendations for improvement.
Oh no, leave out that part. Leave out that part.
So that's 9 to 10, right, Doc?
Just interpret. Yeah, just interpret because we didn't get a sample. I thought we were going to get. Dr. Williams said she would provide a sample. Remember, I told you. So the papers that she sent was just the scorecards.
Yes, Doc.
So you don't have the actual
items,
paper to see the distractors.
So
no. You can make general recommendations and you can make general interpretations, but you cannot identify a particular to go and so that is where you have to take it from. You can still make general recommendations and make general interpretations as to what could be wrong with the distractors and what you would recommend.
Okay.
But you're not identifying a specific distractor. Follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, we can't.
Right, but you can still make your interpretations as to what you would recommend. And that's what we did last week.
What could be wrong and then make recommendations based on that.
As to what would be needed, what might be needed. All right?
Yes.
So
Another
you
thing
take it from that angle and don't you don't have a particular distractor to look at, but you would still have an idea of what you would need to go and do. You'd still be able to say what would be the general recommendations in a case like this, where this is the interpretation.
Okay. So
Javon is asking something in the chat.
Yes, go ahead, Javon.
He's asking if the rubric will be adjusted in that case.
Javon. It just asks you to make recommendations.
No, but I'm speaking to the volume
to be specific.
Allotted for that particular question. And generally, if I, as a non-teacher, and if I am looking at a rubric and I'm giving 10 marks or something, I would want some specific examples. So I'm just noting that.
No, it doesn't ask us, but it's asking you to interpret the particular item. You're going to evaluate and assess the particular item, right? You're looking at an item and you're doing an evaluation of it based on the difficulty and discrimination indexes. And based on that, you will be able to make recommendations about what could be wrong and what could be done. You do not have to look at any particular specific distractor to do that. In fact, I don't recall in the past, even when the students did administer the test, they didn't go in detail about each particular distractor.
It's because the rubric says it, Doc. That's the problem.
The rubric says make recommendations. So you are going to make general recommendations as to what
no, it says thorough discussion on the distractors. It specifically states that. It's on page 4.
And thorough would indicate some form of example.
Just do it in general terms, like what we were doing last week.
So that's why I'm just making it explicit, Doc, so that when you are going
I
to
don't remember. Just speak in general terms based on the outcome of your discrimination and difficulty indexes.
Okay, Doc.
I can't expect you to talk about a distractor if there isn't one, but I can still hear from you as to what you would recommend.
Okay, Doc.
In general terms, you understand what I'm saying? You got to overthink everything and take everything to the extreme.
Yes, Doc. But Julian has a question in the chat.
Go ahead.
She says that we would. So she says, Miss, so what about those who teach, as that's not fair to those who teach still?
Yeah, because
we're doing more work. To those who teach, there's no difference.
So, Doc, they would administer their questions and they
we're analyzing everything. So that's more work for us to do compared to what they're doing.
I am telling you not to do that. I'm saying speak in general terms as to what would be the general recommendation in a case based on the outcome that you have.
All right, so it applies to everybody, even if we're administering the test.
Yes,
even if we're administering, okay.
You just want to see if you understand how to interpret the difficulty and discrimination index, and if you understand how to move forward, what you would do next. But you don't have to go to the specific example. You're not writing an essay here. Okay? What we need specifically is the calculations of the difficulty and discrimination index and what they mean to you based on the outcome, right? And you also have the tables that you're going to set up, because remember, your tables is going to show you the responses of every item, yes? Your tables is going to show you the responses of every item.
No doubt that was not required.
Are there, eh?
Yes.
All the responses are there to every item. The score for every item is there. So based on the responses, you're able to look at the distractors, because you're getting responses to different distractors. So based on that, you have your little tables, you're going to interpret it just like how we did it last week. We didn't go into any specific item to look at the question itself, but we were able to interpret the tables.
10 answered question.
We were able to interpret the tables, right, for every item and set of responses. Okay.
And Doc, I have something else that I want to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
So I know you said to write generally about the item analysis. That's okay.
Write generally about the interpretation of the outcomes when you set up the tables for every item.
When you set up it.
Doc, the king did not ask for any tables.
She's talking about the
It doesn't
table
ask you for the
specification.
table, but you know
No,
that
no, not
you
table
should
of
set up your tables. We did it last week.
But I'm looking at the rubric what the thing asks for, because if we remember that some of us are not going to have tables with the questions because we're using two separate things. Some of us are using, some of us will create our own tests, which will not be analyzed, and then others are analyzing that test that we got, or the scores that we got.
No, we're not talking about the test. We're not talking about the test construction at all. We're talking about the outcomes.
When you have the grades. Right.
When you have the grades, that's what we're talking about.
So are we required to present the grades of the test?
Yes, sir. Then that's what Dr. Williams provided. She provided the outcomes of all she provided all the grades, right? But
yes.
Based on how each person responded, right? So everybody didn't respond the same to every item, right? So for every what was it? Just the outcome of the grade itself that she provided?
She sent us a Scantron. So you would have to look at it. So that's a Scantron. So at the end of the Scantron, you'll see a mark of 30, 10 out of 30.
You will see the correct item, the one that is the correct one, right? So that person, you see where the person is correct. And so the person who is correct, that means to say, and then another person who is incorrect. Because isn't it every item that you mark?
Yes, Doc.
On the test for every student?
Yes, Doc. Yes, Doc.
Yes. So you know the one, so you set up, I see what you're saying. What you're trying to say is you're not going to know how every student responded to every item, but you will, won't you? Yes. For every item, you're going to know how every student responded. You'll know how many students responded to A, B, C, D choices. You will know the choices that every student made. Am I correct?
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Yes,
you
Doc,
know
you're
by
correct.
the cards. So if you know by the cards how every student responded, then you set up the little tables for every item, just like we had in our PowerPoints.
And Doc, just go by table, you mean like when we set up
We set up the little
to distractor
thing to
A,
show,
or
yes, to show the
10,
top
10
level.
students answered A. 5
Yeah,
students
The
answered
assignment
to
didn't
B.
ask for that. That's what I'm saying, Doc. The assignment did not say anything about
It does not have to ask for it. That is a way for you to interpret it.
No.
Particular when they speak about
that is automatic, Javon.
Question
No,
7.
it's not.
Question 7.
Javon, if you don't want to set it up, you don't have to set it up, but you still go have to show how the distractors, how many didn't respond to the correct item and how many. So no better you set up the table, make it easier for yourself. You don't have to do it that way, but you were shown to do it that way. So if you are shown to do it in a simplified way that organize it for you, then you adopt the same thing. If you want to help yourself, you can do it any way you want, as long as it come out back to how that you know how to interpret it properly. We don't have to tell you that. You can set it out how you want. You can organize it how you want, as long as it come back to the same thing that you learned in class. I am suggesting, and I'm here with you discussing the assignment, and I'm saying to you, set up the table like how we did it in class to help you. But if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. You can do it your way. Just make sure that you interpret it in a similar manner to what we did in class so that I can get the full response. You understand?
Yes, Doc, understood. I still have my question.
So if I'm trying to help you and guide you and give you a heads up. Okay?
Okay.
So question. That would be the section that talks about the result of 20 students presented. That would be the table that you're talking about, right? Just to
Yes,
confirm.
you are to take out
Okay.
20 students and set up and interpret their test outcomes, the test outcomes of, I think it's 20 students or 20 items.
20 students and 20 items.
Yeah, I don't remember what it says exactly, but it's the same assignment that I've been marking year in, year out. This one has not really changed.
Okay, Doc, in terms,
You are using I
was going with my question. So continue.
Go ahead.
All right. In terms of the number 8, discuss the overall validity of your test and how you would go about making your test reliable. Now, in the
Yes.
rubric, it says this discussion refers to relevant literature and the results of the item analysis. So if I'm going to do a discussion based on the item analysis of the test that Dr. Clavier McBean sent, how will I be able to talk about the content validity if I don't see the items? Will I have to generalize here as well?
You'll have to you'll have to generalize based on the item analysis. You can have a discussion, and that's part of all of our discussion. There are implications.
All right. So if we have to generalize, right, going to number 9.
You can't give examples because you can only give an example of the item to say in the validity, the difficulty or discrimination or the thing implicated so and so, therefore. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, Doc. So what would I put
But I mean, you wouldn't be able to show what the item stated in it to say, okay, it showed ambiguity because this and that, but you can say the kids, right? That there's possible ambiguity or there's possible, maybe insufficiency in whatever way. So you can talk about validity and reliability in a more general way based on the implications, but you can't say specifically or refer to how the item actually looks or how it's written. But you do know based on the item analysis that this is a good test or not such a good test.
Okay, so going to number 9, where it talks about the challenges of making classroom tests valid and reliable. I'm still going to generalize here. So I think that the same thing that I'm going to put in number 8 is going to come in number 9.
Not necessarily, because in one she's asking for overview, and the other one she's talking about what kind of notions you surmise from your
item analysis.
Yeah, so you just go with the best you can. I will know, right? So what you all do, just to make it even more clear, is if you're using the sample provided, indicated that you used a sample that was provided and it was not an administered test.
I was planning to put that in there
right away. Yeah.
Okay.
Not that I am going to mark you any harder or whatever. I'm not going to mark the others harder because of, you see what I'm saying? I will understand the situation. The truth is that if I had realized we weren't going to get the full test paper, I would have administered one in class. And then we could have used your same test papers in this class. I could have administered a test in the class and then just send them back to you without the names. And then everybody would have had a good sample in hand, the same sample to use. Well, not the same, because those who have their own classroom, they can go with that, but everybody would have had that benefit of seeing the actual items in front of them, which would make it a little bit easier for you to do in your interpretations, but you'd still have a fair notion you remember last week when we were discussing, we had no items in front of us when we were making our interpretations and discussing the implications. And you have to remember too, that based on what we did today, that is even a further analysis for you, because you're going to be doing that as well with the test outcome, you know. You're going to take those grades and you're going to do what you saw me do today in the slides. You're going to calculate your mean and your standard deviation, and you're going to be able to say, based on the outcome, what are the implications of the performances of these students, right? So you'll have a better idea too. All right, so you just do the best you can. You're not going to be penalized for that. We don't normally we have never told any student that they must set up a table to do their item analysis. But because that's the way they learn to do it, so they automatically resort to that. Right? To make it clearer, because they're setting up a little table helps to make it clearer. It helps to organize the test outcome and make it clearer for you when you're doing your analysis, but you don't have to do it. As long as you show the calculations and they're correct. Okay?
All right, Doc.
Yeah, and it's hard to see what the outcomes are if you don't set them out in some way, you know? So you can decide how you want to set it out.
All right, Doc, can I ask you a question, please?
Sure.
Last week I told you that I had administered a test. However, I did not get 20 responses. I'm currently at 12. So should I use that 12?
I think you asked me that question and I suggested 12 would be okay.
I thought you suggested 15.
No,
15
I
out of
said
the
12 to 15.
Okay, then.
12
All right,
or
good.
15, that would be fine. I think it would be quite fine. All right. Okay.
Good night. Just to confirm that we were, Doc? Yes, you were asked to do according to the question, it said we were supposed to do 10 and not 20. So I just wanted to confirm that it's actually 10 and not 20, as you said earlier.
What it says in the thing?
10.
Yes, you're to take 10 of the items and analyze them. That's what I recall.
Okay, no, thanks.
I said 20.
Well, you have to do at least, I had that question last week, and we have to do at least 27. You were working that question with me. So for number 4, we need to do at least 27 questions. When analyzing for the item analysis, you need to analyze 10 of them. That's my understanding.
10 of the items.
Yes, 10 of the items.
So that's 10 of the items on the test.
Correct.
So
But
what
when
you're talking about the 27, I'm not understanding that part.
you have to construct that amount.
Clarify what we're doing
4.
the analysis on. Is it the one Dr. Matt being sent, or is it on the one that we created?
No, you're doing the item analysis on the one that she sent. You cannot do it on the one.
I know, that's what I think that's where Tedisha is getting, that's what she's getting.
Yeah, she's getting
so that's
mixed
what I
up.
want.
Yeah, the 27 items.
It's what we have to construct.
If you administer the test that you constructed, which is for the people who have their own classroom connections, then the test that you administer, that you construct, is the test that you're supposed to administer and get the results of. But for the people who don't have that option, then you're going to construct a sample test to show us that you understand how to construct a sample test using your TOS. But for the item analysis, you're going to use the sample that Dr. Williams sent, just for showing that you are able to analyze, the items on a test. You're able to to administer that part of it.
So we use those sample items in the table, Miss, just to be clear.
Yeah, you use in the sample she sent to you. You can't use what you don't administer and don't have any results for. You have to use what you have results for. You cannot you're not going to analyze. The item analysis has to do with calculating the discrimination and difficulty indexes. Therefore, you have to have outcomes. You have to have some results to work with, okay?
I'm confused now. Doc,
Lord have
so
mercy.
how many questions at number 4, the test construction? Because I'm reading the one without administration. So how many test items should I have for that one? Because I'm not administering.
Were you here in the class when I went through this?
Mm-hmm.
Twice, you know.
Yes, I
went through it again. You are what you construct. Are you administering it yourself?
No.
If you're not administering it, then that's not what you're going to use to do your item analysis. You're going to use a sample of test results that Dr. Williams sent to do.
And I understand that, Doc.
Right. That is a separate thing from the construction of a test.
I understand that. And
right. So why are you asking me how many items follow? The guide, we went through that for the construction of the test. That has nothing to do with the item analysis. Understand?
I know that, Doc. So what I'm saying for the test construction, then those items that we are constructing and have to put in the table of specifications would be at least 27 questions based on what's on the paper. And then where we do the item analysis, it says analysis of the facility index and discrimination index of a sample of 10 selected response. That is coming from Dr. Clavia McBean.
Yes.
So that's my understanding.
Right, that's correct.
Okay, that's all I was saying. All right, thank you.
So it's 10 additional.
It's different.
It's 10 completely different.
Yeah.
It's 10 completely different. It's just from what she sent, just for the item analysis part of it. And for the interpretation of the item and of the difficulty and discrimination indexes. All right.
Doc, can you go over that again, because I'm
Hakeem, go ahead.
Yes,
listening.
I have a question. Yes, so how do we go about doing the standard deviation? So we would calculate both the mean and the standard deviation for the test. And then from that result, we make a general discussion about what we think the performance of the class is.
Right.
Or do we need to look at individual results, individual students, like you did today? Or it was just for understanding?
No, I just used an example to see if you understood the interpretation of with one student.
Okay, so it's just two calculations and then we make the inference.
Yeah, you would interpret the general performance and you would be using Dr. Williams's results for that as well.
Okay.
Because if you have any other results, you have to use that, right? So anything that, so in general, anything that it is item analysis and interpretation. Are you listening? I'm going to say this one more time. Anything that has to do with the hard results, right? That which is the item analysis and its interpretation of difficulty and discrimination indexes and the calculation of the standard deviation and mean and the interpretation of those results. What do they say to you? What are the implications? Okay.
Okay.
So that's it. And the construction of your test now, if you weren't able to administer it to get results, then that is just becomes a sample of a test construct. But it must align with your table of specifications. So that is a completely different end of it, of the assignment. Okay, so the one that I really wanted to show you was that there are some errors on the alternate assessment, which I noticed as I was going through. So I just wanted to mention that to you. Let me just open it quickly. Just give me a sec here. Let me go back to the document. This one is the item analysis, is not that one. So that the one to do with the samples that Dr. McBean sent, I'm looking at the assignment now, is centered on part 5 and part 6, okay? Part 5 and part 6. Okay, let me find back the. That's strange, I had them all open. Where is it now?
Part 5 that speaks to
I had it open, you know.
Items aligned with objective. Develop taxonomy.
That is weird. I had it open and now I can't find the darn document. I want to go back to the alternate assessment for a minute because I saw an error in it. Just give me a sec here. I have to go find it back again.
Doc, while you're looking, is it possible for you to just answer? Are the teachers that are teaching going to be marked for test construction? Just to be clear.
What?
The teachers that are teaching in the classroom, are we going to be marked for our test construction?
Teachers that are teaching?
Yes. For those who are teaching, are we going to be marked for test construction?
I don't understand the question you're asking.
It's the people who are administering the test.
Yes.
Did you construct your test? You mean as part of the assignment?
Yes, because we see nothing.
That don't have anything to do with the teachers who are teaching, and or what you mean exactly. You're supposed to, and you were told from the beginning that you are to construct a test, administer it to somebody, to a classroom of students, either yourself or through a colleague or a friend who is in a classroom, but you are the one that is supposed to construct the test.
Okay,
that's not exactly what she's asking, Doc. She's saying when we construct the test items, will we be marked for how the items are constructed? That's what she's asking.
Everybody will be marked on how the items are constructed. That's the whole idea of your doing a test construct.
Okay, Doc. Thank you.
Everybody will be marked on that. It's in the rubric, it's in the assignment, right? That you have to construct a test and that you will be marked on the quality of the test items. That was the whole thing from the beginning, right? Okay, that you must set up the whole thing.
Yes,
including a quality test, right? That's the whole idea. That's why you're learning so much about item construction. Okay.
Okay, understand. Yes, yes.
So, right. So don't get it wrong there. Hold on, guys, I found it. I'm so tired. Okay, so let's go now. I'm here. There are some errors in it. There are a couple of errors that I picked up in the test. Must be this one. All right, you seeing it now? Are you seeing it?
Yes, Doc.
Yes, Doc, we're seeing it.
I'm coming here. Just let me find back where I had made my notes because I don't want to miss out. Okay, so let me go back. I'm looking at my printed version here while I'm talking to you. So here are the errors which would not affect you adversely, but just to point them out. You see where it says number 4, construct an alternate assessment using an established model, example grass, and it said 10 marks. Well, when I work out the marks with the rubric, there are some errors. This 10 marks here should be 15. So put 15 there if you have it in front of you. That should be 15. All right, so there's that error. And then when you go around to the rubric, just to show you, so you noted that, although that is not going to really affect you, I'm the one that's going to work out that, but as I noticed there was that error. Number 4 should be 15. And when you go down to the rubric here, it's a design of the alternate assessment instrument. You see where it says 15. So that's supposed to align with the assignment above, which should be 15 here, construct an alternate assessment. All right. And please do not get confused with this word instrument, alternate assessment instrument. It's really referring to the same model. Construct an alternate assessment using an established model, GRASS model. Okay, so do not get confused with the word instrument up there. It means the same thing. So when you go to the actual rubric now, you will see in that aligned section, design of an alternate assessment instrument, that it's really 15. Then the other error I found was that when you add up all of these scores, the raw score is supposed to be 75, not 80. All right. So even though there was that error and it was picked up as 15 here, the addition also is incorrect. So this should have been 75 right here, even with the language, style, and organization. So you can note that is 75, because you might come back to me and tell me I didn't mark it out of 80. But when you add it up, when you add up all the raw scores, it's really 75 that it should be. And of course, the weighting is out of 30%. The weighting is 30%. All right. So that should be 75, just for you to know. This is a PDF document, so I would need to, if I just highlight it here. Can you see that? All right, so does everybody have an understanding now in terms of the alternate? I just wanted to point that out to you, those two errors.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to bid you good night now. Everybody have a fruitful rest of the week and continue to keep safe. All right. Any final question before we sign off?
Miss,
next week will be our final class?
Did you mark the register?
Oh, next week is the final.
Okay, Miss.
No, I didn't mark the register, you know. Who is absent? Let me go to by the way, there's one more thing. I am not going to make a big deal of it, although I had told you guys that you were to you were to switch over to the OUR VLE for your discussion forums, and I went to the trouble to set up all the discussion forums for the different topics, except for today's presentation. And most of you is only, I think 3 of you that have used the forum in the OUR VLE, even though I had told you to switch over to the OUR VLE. I told you that only Jason's debate was to continue since they had reached far enough already.
And group 2A, Doc.
To switch over, eh?
And group 2A, because I've posted everything on there, so it would be difficult to switch over.
Yes, but moving ahead, all the other groups were told to, you know, I don't remember at which point, but I remember saying it clearly, must switch over. So because it's a lot easier for me. So what happened is it's just been overwhelming me every time you make a post, it comes in my email. So it's really overwhelmed my email. So I had to actually do something about that. But anyway, I will just let that go. I will let that go and try and work with it. It's just that when you have a couple of people going over to one side and rest going over, you know what I mean? Anyway, what to do? We'll just let that go. I'll just try to work with it the best as I can. Any final question? Akeem, you were asking something. Yes, you did ask me. And are you okay with the response, Akeem?
Yes, Doc, I believe I understand. It's
yes.
Make the 2 calculations and then interpret.
Interpret, yes. Interpret based on how we were going through in class, as much as you can say, you know. Okay.
Yes, Doc.
Don't say foolishness, or don't say unnecessary. There was something else. The register now. Who is anybody who is absent that I should note? Anybody that's absent that I should note? I have the register here in front of me. Anyone in particular absent? Nobody knows? Anybody knows who is absent? All right, Jalene. Did I do
Here, miss.
I didn't do the register last week.
No, miss, why you have me as
No,
absent
miss.
for the last 3 classes and I haven't been absent for this class? Hello?
For when? Last week? I don't have
Miss
you
Max,
absent.
my name missing for 3 classes. I'm gonna miss this. I don't miss this class.
Well, I call the thing every week.
But maybe I wasn't hearing any call, but I haven't missed class. I'm sure you can check the log.
Not hear me 3 times in a row and everybody else is in the class.
That's what I'm not understanding why I'm there absent. But you
Something
can check the
very
log on
funny
Zoom,
about that. That means you gone off to do something and not paying attention.
Miss, you can check the log on Zoom, so you can see that I was there.
I will look then.
Thank you very much.
Brittany? Absent. Let me see. Brittany? Absent. Amelia?
Doc, this is the 11th week of class.
I saw Amelia. But
Amelia was here, miss. She was
this is
here.
the 11th week?
Yes,
Yes,
Doc.
ma'am.
I've been counting.
Oh,
Remember
so
next week.
So you mean I've been missing all of these weeks?
Doc, you just
Yes, Doc. You didn't mark every week.
Ask who absent.
Oh,
Yes,
well,
Doc.
those would just remain present then. All right, well, I keep asking who is absent. Last week I asked. I didn't ask the week before?
Yes, Doc, you did the same thing the week
Yes,
before.
the same thing.
All right, but nobody answers me, right?
No, we answered.
Not true. Brittany? Not true at all. It's something else, you know. Why? You know, rough, you know? Rough.